Okay. Good morning. Okay, please settle down so that we can start with the hearings. We've got 2 minutes to go. Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can you please take your seats? Good morning again, and welcome to the public hearing. Conducted by NERSA, the National Energy Regulator of South Africa. My name is Nomfundo Maseti. I am the member primarily responsible for piped gas, and I'm also chairing the electricity subcommittee, and I will be the chairperson of today's proceedings. With me today, I'm joined by my colleagues. I would like to start introducing my colleagues, starting from my immediate right. I have the chairperson of the National Energy Regulator, Mr. Thembani Pukula. I'll ask the chairperson to greet.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Pukula. On my far right, I have the CEO of NERSA, Ms. Nomalanga Sithole.
Good morning, Chairperson, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. On my immediate left, I have Mr. Musuvukile Mkhize, who is the member primarily responsible for petroleum pipelines at NERSA, as well as the member of the electricity subcommittee. Mr. Mkhize.
Greetings, Chairperson, and greetings to all the attendees. Thank you.
All right, on my far left, I have Ms. Tembeka Simane, who is the member of the Energy Regulator and the member of the Electricity Subcommittee, as well as the chairperson of the Finance Committee at NERSA.
Good morning, Madam Chairperson, and very good morning to you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Just to put on record, the hearing today is about the application filed by Eskom with the Energy Regulator. It is the MYPD6 application by Eskom, and today's hearing is held in accordance with the National Energy Regulator Act of 2004, which governs the hearings and requiring the members of the Energy Regulator to consult before a decision is made, so that affected parties can be able to state their views, as well as providing evidence to the Energy Regulator and assist the Energy Regulator in arriving at the informed decision. I do want to just inform you that this public hearing was duly advertised in various newspapers, including independent newspapers, Rapport, Sowetan, Sunday Times. It was also advertised in the NERSA website, as well as the social media platforms that are handled by the Energy Regulator. I would like to read out some of the rules that are contained in the NERSA public hearing rules, and these are the rules that are going to govern the sitting today. We would require that all the parties that are going to make presentations today to do those presentations under oath. The presenters have been allocated various minutes. We have not stated the amount of minutes that are allocated, but as a minimum, we do grant 15 minutes to each presenter, and that includes questions and answers. Only members of the panel, this panel that is sitting here, that is allowed to ask questions to the presenters. However, we do allow the members of the public here in the audience to write down their questions in a piece of paper and hand it over to Mr. Walter Mabunda, who is right there at the back. And then Walter will bring that piece of paper to us so that we can then see how we can frame the question that you have, but not losing the essence of that question, and then ask the question to the presenter. Should the presenters wish to present information that they consider to be confidential, please inform us so that we can decide whether we would want to hear that information. If we do, we will then clear the room so that we can hear the information. Please note that the hearing today is recorded by microphones, and that shall be the official record of the hearing. I would like to request you at this point to switch off your cell phones or to put them on silent mode so that they do not interrupt the proceedings and people that are presenting. We would like also to remember just to mute yourself so that at least we can be able to hear the presenters quite clearly. We received about 7 requests today, 7 presenters. If there is anyone in the public, in the audience today who wishes to make a presentation and has not indicated beforehand, please go to Walter Mabunda and do make that request with Walter Mabunda, and then the panel will decide where we can squeeze you in should you wish to make a presentation today. Now we're going to start off with the applicant, which is ESCOM, to come forward and give us a presentation. But before we do so, we would like a person who's going to assist us with evacuation procedures.
Morning, everyone. My name is Kiautepa. I work in Protea Hotel. I'm going to show you the exit door. We have 2 exit doors. The other one is at the back, and the other one is here on the side. The emergency assembly point is in the parking lot that side. Thank you.
All right, I just want to check if we have been given the channels for interpretation services. We do have interpretation services. Should you wish to make use of them, and we do also have these headphones, you can make use of the headphones. And then tune to channel 1 for English, channel 2 for Setswana, and then channel 3 for Afrikaans. So those are the 3 languages that we have should you wish to make use of the interpretation services. At this point in time, I would like to invite ESCOM to come forward. Mr. Kasim, if you could kindly come forward and give your presentation. Thank you. Mr. Kasim, may you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you are going to provide to this panel is the truth and the whole truth?
I do, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Please state your full name and your designation at ESCOM.
My name is Caleb Kasim. I'm the Group Chief Financial Officer of ESCOM.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure whether you would want to have... Okay.
Chair, if you can call the 2 colleagues. And then
okay. All right. All right, may you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you're going to provide to the panel is the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
Thank you. May you please indicate your name and your designation at ESCOM?
My name is Brad Ross Jones. I'm the middle manager in the Office of the Group Executive Generation.
Thank you. May you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you're going to provide to the panel is the truth and the whole truth?
Ajib.
Please state your name and your designation at ESCOM.
My name is Rihaz Abramia. I'm the Senior Manager, Revenue Management.
Thank you very much. You may start, Mr. Kasim, with your presentation.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning to the Chair, the panel members, ladies and gentlemen. Chair, I'll deal with the overall and a key topic, and then I'll get Brad to come and deal with some generation issues, and Riaz will deal with specifically municipal debt. Chair, with regard to the ESCOM strategy, I think it's important for the audience to be aware of where ESCOM is going. In terms of our 4 key priorities from an ESCOM perspective, is to ensure that we pursue operational and financial sustainability. That is key. Over these public hearings, we've been talking around the sustainability in terms of performance, but that does have impacts in terms of our financials. We will also, you will see during this presentation today, we'll go into more details on the rear debts, talk about costs, and then in terms of improving controls around fraud, corruption, and criminality. We've also addressed that during the public hearings, and will do so as well during the remaining two hearings. And then in terms of leadership, I think with the board being there for 2 years and now the permanent CEO, that has created stability in terms of ESCOM's leadership. At the end of the day, we also need to cater for a changing industry in terms of where the industry is going, and ESCOM, we've commenced the unbundling process with NTCSA being operationalized from 1 July this year, and as a key component in their side, they will talk about the importance of the transmission development plan, and they will go into more detail at tomorrow's hearings around that. And then in terms of distribution, one of the key initiatives also is to roll out smart meters going forward to address challenges we're facing on the distribution sector. But while we do all of this, we are cognizant that ESCOM has to also decarbonize in terms of our strategy of being net zero by 2050. And as key to this, in terms of the first priority, we have tweaked our strategy around generation, whereas previously it was around shutting down of the coal stations and units. We now need to ensure that supplying the needs of the country as a key priority. We've now moved to ensuring that the existing units that we do have available, let's utilize them to the end of their lives. And Brad will go into more detail on 17 units that are now focused in terms of continued operations. In terms of the application, we've done so in terms of the legislative requirements, the ERA, the electricity pricing policy, and the MYPD. We've consulted in terms of MFMA, in terms of SALGA and National Treasury. And in this application, we don't include any additional RCAs. Those determinations are yet to be made by the regulator, and with regard to any liquidations thereof. Importantly, I will touch on in the next slide is that yes, we are looking as part of the regulatory mechanism that efficient costs are passed on to the consumer. There's prudency tests that the regulator will ensure that ESCOM complies with, and will also take into account all the inputs it receives from the public over this next 2.5 weeks. In terms of this process, as the Chair has indicated, we are dealing with the MYPD6. I'll go into more detail on that, but there is another important application in front of NERSA with regard to the retail tariff plan that deals with the restructuring of tariffs. That will also have its own process in terms of a public hearing with a decision expected in January. Importantly, the outcome of the MYPD6 plus plus the retail tariff plan will be used to determine what the eventual tariff to the consumer will be from April next year for Eskom customers and from July next year for municipal customers. If we just look at the overall in terms of the allowable revenue that Eskom has requested, in terms of the methodology, it's your regulatory asset base, then in terms of the weighted average cost of capital, the return on assets that Eskom has applied for, and then the recovery of its operating costs, and I'll go into more detail on that. All of that is then divided by the forecasted sales volume to give you a cents per kilowatt, and then you compare that to the existing price to get then the adjustment in terms of the tariff that Eskom has requested during MYPD6. So, Chair and members, as well as the public, in terms of our application, firstly, if I just touch on the regulatory asset base, you can see importantly that we believe as Eskom there is very good alignment in terms of the regulatory asset base from an Eskom and a NERSA perspective. When you look at the decision of 2025, that 988 billion then grows to trillion and 66 billion in the first year, and then 1.2 trillion by the end of the MYPD6 period, taking into account additional growth in capex and units that are then commissioned during the period, as well of any units that then stop during the period or are sold, etc. What you do see coming through in this application, we have, as Eskom, put in a phasing in of the return on assets, where it then increases from the 1.58% currently to 4% in the first year, FY26, then 5%, and then followed by 6% in FY28. Chair, some of the key items, you will see that on the primary energy side there is a growth in the first year compared to the decision, and then it remains relatively flat over the subsequent years. And one of the key factors also contributing to the overall primary energy is the timing of when IPPs do get connected to the grid. You do see that the IPP's requirement in the first year drops from what was awarded in FY25 from 77 billion to about 67 billion, and then it goes back to the FY25 levels. Does mean that Eskom plant must pick up that requirement in terms of energy that needs to be produced. And in this application, complying with policy in terms of carbon tax, we see for a quarter of the year, the first tranche of carbon tax coming through of 5.5 billion, and then the full impact for the whole year, which ends up at around 20 billion in the second and the third year. And then we've also, and Riaz will go into more detail on this, around the arrear debts that Eskom has submitted in this application. Just to reiterate, in terms of the RCAs, we only make use of the current decisions and the phasing thereof. There is no other RCAs included in the MYPD6 application. In terms of Eskom's financial sustainability, there are 4 pillars that is required for Eskom to be sustainable. In terms of the balance sheet, we need to delever the balance sheet, and I'll go into more detail on that today. We're dealing with municipal debt as well. Today it's about the revenue application around MYPD6, and we'll talk a bit on cost efficiencies. The key message here is that all components need to contribute to Eskom's financial sustainability. We can't only deal with one component because it doesn't solve our sustainability going forward. And the benefit of being financially sustainability, it contributes positively to our operational requirements and our operational strategy going forward. Chair, this is just to show in terms of past applications, what we've asked for, what was awarded, what were the differences in the revenues, and in the green bars, and I'll go in more detail on that, the cumulative support we received to date, understanding the debt relief ends in March 2026. And then whilst we're doing that, in solving the gap, Eskom had to also borrow over this period, which resulted in the debt on the balance sheet in 2023 reaching 424 billion rand, which is clearly an unsustainable level for Eskom going forward. Chief, going to now more detail in terms of the government support we've received over the last few years. Going as far back as 2016, we first were given a 60 billion rand loan from government, and then it was converted into equity. Then we commenced with equity direct support of the 23 billion rands times 3 years. We got the first tranche coming through in FY 2016. Chair, you won't see another 223s because effectively following that and what were the needs of Eskom, the support that was then given as equity injections was rephased to give you the 49 billion to 56, followed by about 32 and 22 billion rand. And now we're in the window where we're in the government support debt relief period. FY 24 we received 76 billion. FY 25, the year that we're currently in, 64 billion. Next year will be 40 billion. And then effectively there's a debt takeover of 70 billion. Cumulatively, this adds up to just under 492 billion of support that Eskom has received over these years. And the difference, I've also quoted a number of 496. Originally, when the government support was granted, it totaled 254 billion. However, 2 billion was withheld because of the delay in the disposal of the Eskom Finance Company. And this year, there's also an assumption that a further 2 billion will be delayed, or will not be granted because we haven't concluded that transaction. So that's just reconciling the difference between the 496 and the 492, coming back to the 254 billion government support. The key point here, Chair, is one, we've got a number of conditions in terms of the government support we have to comply with. Once we comply with that, we make the application to National Treasury to convert that to equity. Thus far, Eskom has been compliant and it has been converted to equity. But importantly, to highlight that in the Minister of Finance's speech, 2023, the importance of migrating towards cost-reflective tariffs to allow Eskom to become self-sufficient, the importance of the user pay principle. That is critical. Government cannot continuously support Eskom going forward. As you can see, there are many other programs that government needs to deal with. There are almost 500 billion rand worth of support over these past few years. I think it's importantly, Chair, as I said, in our application, we put forward a migration in terms of the return on assets to 4%, 5%, and 6%. At the end of this period of the debt relief, we do then see that our debt on the balance sheet will reduce below 270 billion and contributing to Eskom becoming more financially viable, so that when we do re-enter the capital markets to borrow in the future, we need to do it on the back of not being reliant on government support and guarantees going forward. And importantly, with this government support and the trajectory that we're on, we believe that we'll also see the benefits of a potential then upgrade in credit ratings, which then reduces cost of financing going forward. So if I then move on, Chairperson, in terms of electricity sales, there are a number of factors that go into the electricity sales forecast: commodity prices, weather patterns, etc., and labor costs, etc., logistics costs, etc., and what is happening in the different commodity cycles. That is effectively built up on a bottom-up process through distribution with the key customers, and then the 20% that is remaining is done on historic information and trend analysis to give us the forecast in terms of sales. We do acknowledge that you do see the element of embedded generation coming through in the sales forecast. Like we presented at these hearings, is in a region of 5 to 6 gigawatts of embedded generation rooftop PV. That's over and above through the government's initiatives in terms of bid windows. We already have about another 6 gigawatts of IPPs, substantially renewables, on the grid at this point in time. Chair, I'm not going to go into detail of how I just explained this. And then in terms of our sales, we basically came up with a cone in terms of an upside and a downside based on our application, Chair, and then indicating that the line in the middle is the trajectory in terms of our sales forecast for MYPD6 3-year horizon. This is just showing the detailed factors that are taken into account in coming up with our sales forecasting. I'm not going to go into that detail, with the upside indicating around 1.9% and the downside in terms of sales being up to about minus 7.5% in terms of a worst case scenario in terms of the sales forecast. Chair, in terms of the application and how do we get to the 36% in the first year of FY26, the contributing factors, the first one being negotiated pricing agreements from MYPD5 to MYPD6 in the region of some 12 new agreements were awarded, which means that for Eskom then to recover its costs, it's then recovered over the rest of the customer base. That comes to a 5.7% impact in terms of the price of electricity. As I've indicated in the earlier slide, we do see then the upward adjustments coming through on primary energy of 11.2% in the first year and 10% on the OPEX. We'll talk about arrear debts with RIAs, and then I touched on the return on assets, and then just with the drop in the IPPs in the first year and the introduction of carbon tax to give you the 36%. Chair, in terms of low-income households and affordability, as Eskom, as part of our tariffs, we have a home light 20 amp tariff, and that is currently at about a 43% subsidy to that customer category. We also have highlighted in this public hearings the importance of utilizing the free basic electricity, which currently has an uptake of around 20% and some 80% is not being utilized. Chair, as part of the retail tariff plan, we've also made a submission as Eskom that let's keep the tariffs and remove the inclining block rate, because as you consume above 350 kilowatts per hour, then the price of electricity goes up. We do believe then that embedded subsidy in that lower tariff category does remain in our proposal, but that's a separate process that NERSA will adjudicate on. Chair, I'm not going to go into detail on this. I basically spoke about it. And then this is basically showing visually the utilization, and these are studies that were done by Stats SA as well as the Reserve Bank in recent years with regard to free basic electricity. Chair, that is my summary in terms of the overall application of Eskom. I will now ask Brad to come and talk on the generation side. Thanks.
get the arrows on this thing? Okay, so in previous hearings, the minister requested more information on a number of 3 issues, and I'm going to address those today. So firstly, on maintenance and maintenance costs. So just to point out that the amount we're requesting and applying for in F26 is actually slightly down from what we're projecting to use this year, and then that is further reduced in the following year and slightly more in F28. When we look at our maintenance requirements, we really break it down into 4 areas. So we need outages periodically to maintain the plant. So we look at how much we need for outages. Then we've got a technical plan, which is our major projects for upgrades and things like that, and for performance improvement. So we analyze that. And then there's routine maintenance, which is typically what we do online, which is just smaller activities. And then, of course, there's breakdown maintenance when we have a problem and we need to fix that so that the plant can be brought back again, or sometimes just improved. So this all starts, so these requirements for outages, tech plan, and routine maintenance all starts from a life of plant plan based on the requirements of the original equipment manufacturers, OEMs, what they advise, and then our own engineering studies to determine what's the optimal level of maintenance for us. So as part of this, it tells us the timing and scope of what activities are needed. So we need to know when we're going to do it and what we're going to do, what activities we're going to do. In terms of breakdowns, though, we need to estimate what we expect to in terms of breakdowns, and then we plan accordingly on that. So then for each of these activities, we look at a line item, and then we cost that. And then we build that up into each subsection, and that eventually comes to what the revenue requirement is, and we base the application on. So really what this means is that any variations from year to year are not based on a previous year. What they are is a zero-based, bottom-up approach on what is required by the plant. And I'll come into more detail later, but it's still below international benchmarks, what we're asking for. So the main reason for it has increased from the 25 application, which was quite a bit lower than what we're going to spend in 25. And the main reason from this is our strategy change. If you recall, in the 2035 strategy, we were planning on shutting down 3 stations practically by now. They would have almost all shut down by now. But in order to ensure security of supply, we're going to continue running these stations. Only Komati's been shut down and is no longer running. So that really is 17 more units. So that's the major impact. But in addition, in terms of requirement, we've increased the amount of maintenance so that we can improve our performance, and I think that's evidenced by the improvement in EAF that we've had recently. So these listings that I mentioned, these are in the application, in the addenda or appendices to the application, and it's really, really detailed. So what I'm going to do is just show an indicative example. You won't necessarily be able to see the numbers, but it just indicates how we do it. So you can see in the top area, I don't know if you can see the cursor. Yeah. So there it breaks it down into the 4 areas, and then there's a further breakdown of each of those areas: outages, tech plan, and then the routine maintenance. Okay, so that shows how we do it, and that's for every station, every unit is built up like that. And in terms of the international benchmarks, okay, remember that the application, I've spoken about this, we looked at what we required, and it was lower than what we need now because of our change in strategy. So the forecasts now are aligned with the lot. And as you can see here, this is the increase in the maintenance expenditure that we are applying for and what we're going to need. But even with this increase, we're still below the low range of the benchmark, this internationally accepted benchmark that's used by numerous organizations. The range there is about 1.75% of installed, up to 3%. And there we are, even at the end of the period, we're still below the 1.75%. Then moving on to EAF and what we expect. So what we need to look at is the performance of a plant needs to take the context into account. The context is different for everybody. So what we assumed in the application, and I stress it's an assumption, is that we would achieve 61% this year, and then moving up 2% to 63%, and then after that 1% per year, all the way to 2030. So at the time, even that might have been considered to be optimistic. So we also did a stress test with even lower EAFs, which you can see there. Just to note, of course, that we have improved beyond that, and we're already doing slightly better than those assumptions. In the end of last week, we were at almost 63%, which is showing good progress from where we were a year ago at, from memory now, around 55%. So that's already shown a good improvement. And you would have seen a lot in the press, I guess, about 70% by the end of this financial year. What I need, maybe I should just give a brief explanation of EAF, because some people might not know what we're talking about, even though we see it in the press all the time. So what EAF is, it's the energy availability factor, and really it's a measure of how much capacity is available for a certain amount of time. So we look at the available energy, and energy is your capacity of the power stations times the time in any period, divided by what it could have produced if it was available 100% of the time. And we express that as a percentage. So we can use any period of time for this. Typically, if you see things in, for example, in this application, we look at an annual average. So we do it over the number of hours in the year. But we also measure it year to date, obviously, as we go through the year. We measure it monthly, we do it weekly, we do it daily, etc. And I need to stress that when we're targeting 70% by the end of the year, that's not the average for the year. That's for a day by the end of the year, and that's what we're striving to achieve. So at the end of the year, it will not be 70%. It's actually physically impossible at the moment. All right. The other point on this is that, the EAF is still only on 62%, and with that, we've achieved the 249 days as of today of no load shedding. But I also need to stress that the system is still very tight. We need to continue improving to meet the demand that we're having at the moment, and to do so with space to do maintenance that we need, etc. There's been a delay in the IPPs from what we assumed in MYPD5. Not all of these that were assumed to have been online have come online, which means that the demand that Eskom sees is higher than what we expected. So we've had to meet that shortfall. I think Caleb mentioned that as well. Right, so in terms of the context, there are a couple of key points I'd like to make, and maybe I need to explain energy utilization again. So that really doesn't look at how much plant is available, but it looks at how much energy we actually produced during that time that the plant was available. Okay, so it's actual energy produced within a certain period. That's not the whole period, but just when the plant is available. So simplistically put, the energy availability factor, the energy utilization factor, EUF, tells you how hard you're running the plant. So as you can see here, we, since the early 2000s, have been running in what we call the red zone. It's above 80%. The plant's not designed for that. It's not expected. We had to do that because of the late decision to build and to keep the lights on, especially during 2010, leading up to that for the World Cup, if you remember that. But what happens when you run it at these levels is it puts additional strain on the plant. At the same time, we weren't able to do all the maintenance we needed to do because of both financial constraints due to sub-cost-effective tariffs and in addition the space that was on the system. So I equate this to when you drive your car, you need to take it for a service maybe every 15,000 kilometers, and you're sitting there and you're in a Formula One race, so you're revving this thing at the limit for extended periods of time, and you're also only servicing it every maybe 25,000 kilometers. So that's really what's happened. And as you can see from this, even the lowest quartile, the bottom quartile, Eskom's are the dotted lines in this, and the reference benchmark are the solid lines. So you can see that we were running it significantly harder. Even the lowest quartile, which is the 25% of the units that are running at the lowest and running least hard, are running higher for most of the period than the most hard running units in the reference. Okay, so the other thing we need to look at is the age of the fleet. Now we've taken Kamati out because that station is shut down, and that's reduced the average age of our fleet, including the new stations that are just on average with the units 5 and 7 years old, to 41 years. That's an old fleet. On its own, an old fleet is not a problem. You can still run it efficiently and effectively, but when you combine that with that hard running over almost 20 years, or maybe around 20 years, and with all the deferred maintenance, specifically the big what we call midlife refurbishments, as it approaches the middle of the life, you need to change out major components, etc., to enable the plant to run efficiently to the end of the year. And all of those three factors together provide the context for where our performance is at the moment. There are many factors, but these are the key factors. Okay, so I spoke about EUF, and I think I need to show something here. And this is what our application shows. So we're comparing where we are, how hard we're running the plant. So in F24, 82%, that's higher than we want to. But we're projecting the what we call residual demand, that's the demand Eskom sees, to come down over the years significantly because of reduced demand. Part of this is due to the IPPs coming in, that we assume are going to be coming in the application. So that goes all the way down to 46-45% by the end of F23. What this means, though, is that there is a lot of room to run harder. So even if we assume now, just apologies, in the last bullet of this table, there's a typo. So don't look at the numbers 62 and 67 there. That's supposed to be 70% and 72. So even if we say, okay, let's increase it we can run it from 45%, we can run it up to 70%, and that's within a reasonable range for energy utilization. If we can run it at 70% utilization, keeping your EAF the same at 67, you don't have to increase the EAF to do that. If we did it, you could get even more out of it. But that we could get, an estimate, around over 7,000 megawatts additional capacity. And that could meet a higher demand that either could come from economic growth in the country, or it could come from the IPPs that don't come in like we expect them to, and we're assuming in the application. So I think that was mentioned earlier, and maybe it wasn't clear, so I hope that clears that issue up. Right, so in summary, the context is you've got stations running very, very high utilization with limited maintenance because of money and space, and that's all the root causes of the late government decision to allow the new build, which led to inadequate capacity and an imperative to maintain supply alongside efficient improvement cost reflective tariffs over many, many years. So really what says the assumptions that we have put in the MYPD6 application are adequate to allow for significant growth and account for late entry of IPPs. So we are saying that what we're projecting is prudent and efficient performance. Thank you. So moving on to just talking about maintenance here, so we can see the increase in maintenance. This is the Eskom level, but we can see what we're improving, doing more maintenance because of the additional capacity in it, etc. Moving on to fuel oil. So we have shown this at previous meetings, but it's probably worth showing again that there are a couple of when we use fuel oil, we use it for a number of reasons. So specifically use it to when you need to start up units and when you shut down units. You need it for combustion support, in other words, to ensure that your plant keeps running, and specifically when you're running at low levels. Because it's not as stable running at low levels than it is at its at full capacity or close to full capacity, because we don't want to induce the risk of plant trips, etc. So you run it with combustion support fuel oil for that. Specifically when we are ramping up and down, as the sun goes down and the solar is not there as much, so we need to ramp up our coal units, and to do that and to manage to do that stably, we use fuel oil for that. So from a safety point of view, we use it specifically when we do shutdowns, when protection systems operate, etc. The list is there, and then of course when we have maintenance, either breakdown or planned maintenance. If you do online repairs, for example, so you don't want to shut the unit down, but you need to fix small things, you make sure you keep that plant running. You can use combustion or fuel oil for combustion support there. Then moving on. So if we look at the increase from the NERSA decision for FY25 to what's in the application for FY26, there's a price element of about 11% and a volume contribution of 89%. So the price is predominantly from, the volume is predominantly from the change in strategy, which I spoke about earlier. We've got more units running. So you obviously need more fuel oil for that. In terms of the price, of course, that is largely driven by the market, so we have limited control over that. So there's also an element of the operational recovery that we've seen in a 10% improvement roughly over the last year. So we need more maintenance. We're doing significantly more maintenance that needs more fuel oil for that. There are more shutdowns for outages, etc. And then I spoke about ramp up and stabilization of the unit. One thing I didn't mention though was when we do pre-commissioning tests and post-commissioning tests, etc., and optimization, you need fuel oil for that. So really what it means is that if we limit fuel oil usage, it would inhibit our ability to improve performance. It would increase the risk of trips, and it would also increase the risk of units not returning when we need after outages. So now I'm going to look at the increases, what I've spoken about now from the decision and the history and what we see in the forecast for this year. I think I've been through all of that and we've seen it. I think just to add that from what we are forecasting for this year to what we're applying for in F26, there's a total cost increase of 9%, and of that 5% is on the volume, so the balance is 4% is on the price, of which we don't really have control. There was a specific comment about the increase from F19. So to address that, as you can see, that's gone up from about 3.7 billion in F19 to 10 billion here. So again, 60% of that is due to price, where we don't really have control over that because it's market related. The remaining 40% is the volume impact, and I think we need to take into account, since then we've got 4 additional units at Kusile and 3 additional units at Medupi, and much higher levels of maintenance for our performance improvement. So, for example, in F19 we did 9.9% planned maintenance, and this year we're doing 11.6%. And I just want to add, of course, that because the demand is lower in summer, we do most of our maintenance over the summer period, and with the financial year being from April to March, the bulk of our maintenance is going to be between now and the end of the financial year. So that number is likely to increase. So there's also a feeling that maybe because it's startups, so your trips can have a big influence in the usage of fuel oil. However, we found that between then and now, the trips has not had a significant impact, your total trips, because overall we had a total of 641 in F19, and so far this year we've had 510. So there's not a huge jump in the number of trips there. However, there are a number of stations which I mentioned here where they give the main impact on the increase, and these stations typically have a lot more startups. So this is not really the trips, it's all startups that are successful. So their number of startups has increased significantly, these 5 stations, as well as the operating hours has increased significantly. And as we spoke about combustion support, that has a large impact on that. Okay, thank you.
Good morning to the panel and everybody here. So my task is to talk through the municipal debt as well as the payment levels and the link to the impairment application component in the MYPD6. So if you look at where we are from an operating perspective, looking at performance over a number of years, starting from 2019 to where we are in the FY25 period, reflecting on September 2024, you will see there's been a steep incline in terms of the overall total debt as we have it at the end of September 24, sitting at 93 billion rands. When we look at the overdue debt and we compare that to what happens from a payment level perspective, the link is essentially that if something is not paid, it becomes overdue, and therefore payment levels that are smaller tends to have an effect of a higher overdue debt itself. So our current payment levels are sitting at about 95% at the end of FY24 mid-year. Municipal levels are sitting at 88.8%, and the non-municipal segment doing very good. If you look at our actual overall payment levels trending since 2019 going down to 2024, you can see that decline from 95.8% declining down to the 94.9%, and the picture below gives you an indication that's largely driven by the municipal debt segment. You can see that the non-municipal debt segment has got growth, however not significant compared to the others. So what is the challenge at the end of the day when it comes to the municipalities? If you look at underlying, the problem really lies with the municipalities in terms of their systemic challenges itself. There's a number of issues. They may differ from municipality to municipality, or even for metros for that matter as well. But there are some common themes that we tend to pick up, and you'll pick up this if you look at what's happening in terms of reports, whether it's from the AG, etc., and you'll get this tendency in terms of trying to understand what are the bottom line problems. So looking at the systemic challenges, one of the big challenges is that the ring-fencing of the electricity business with the municipalities is not always the case for all municipalities. So each municipality is supposed to ring-fence their electricity business from the other services so that you can manage each of the services separately. Your budgeting component is supposed to ensure that from a municipal segment perspective you have a funded budget, and a funded budget would mean that you have sufficient funds to pay for all of your services for that particular period. So if you have an unfunded budget, basically you're planning for a cash shortfall at the end of the day, and that cash shortfall eventually ends up on the ESCOM side or the water board for that matter itself. There are challenges with regard to energy losses, so supplying customers, and then you have customers who are basically stealing electricity and not paying for those services. They have to pay for that energy component nevertheless. And I think there's a declining revenue and poor financial discipline in many of the municipalities, and then there's a shortage of skills as well. So those are some of the challenges that actually we see coming out from the different municipalities, but ultimately this results in a late payment, or as we see, non-payment to the full accounts on the ESCOM side itself. So from an ESCOM perspective, if we reflect on the journey we've traveled over many years to try and contain this municipal debt and what we've done, what has worked, what hasn't worked, etc. You go far back as from 2015, from a National Treasury perspective, they took a decision to withhold funding to municipalities. to try and implement a mechanism of forcing the municipalities to deal with the payments of electricity accounts, etc. And we found that they had to release those monies very shortly thereafter. So that didn't work. During 2017 to 2019, there's been a number of engagement with ESCOM and government to look at concessions that we can give to the municipalities. And there's been a number of concessions that we have given over that period of time, whether it's interest concessions, whether it's payment concessions, etc. As we get closer, you find that during the 2020 period, we looked at the PAJA process, disconnection of municipalities. Many of those applications ended up in court, and then we were forced through the processes in terms of saying that you have to follow the Intergovernmental Relationship Framework Act processes, i.e. engagement before you go to court. And that legal outcome then forced us to have further engagements with municipalities for payments before you can go to a disconnection process. Now, in March 2023, National Treasury came up with a National Treasury Debt Relief Program. So it is an incentivized program for municipalities to participate. And if they were successful to this program, they would see much of the historical debt, the overdue debt up to March 2023 actually being written off by ESCOM itself. But it had a number of conditions that the municipality has to fulfill, and they had fulfilled those conditions essentially that will help them to basically ensure that they're not dealing with a historical problem, they're just dealing with the day-to-day itself. Now, one of those conditions, and just one of those conditions, which directly impacts is the requirement that they pay for their current accounts. So from March 2023, or from whenever they sign up, the municipality signed up, then essentially they needed to ensure that they pay their current accounts. So if they pay their current accounts, we would not be seeing an overdue debt growth as we see at this point in time. So on this slide, I've tried to summarize where we are with that process itself. So we find that there were 71 municipalities that did apply for the program. The 71 municipalities represented the most significant component of the debt as at March 2023. You see there was 55 billion rand of overdue debt belonging to these municipalities that applied. The total Munich debt at that time was 58 billion. So just to give you the context of that, we are seeing a number of them that are successful. So that area that's showing green on the zeros on the number of periods is saying that some municipalities are adhering to payment of their current accounts. So I'm just monitoring purely the one item, which is the current account payments. All of the other conditions, National Treasury monitors. The problem is the other municipalities that we have itself that are defaulting have got significant defaults. So since inception into the program, we're seeing that there's been a 10.5 billion rand growth on these municipalities that are defaulting. And essentially, our expectation was these municipalities that are signed up would have no municipal debt growth. So we are challenged. The program is basically bringing some municipalities on board, others are slower to respond, and we're seeing that the debt is still continuing to grow. So whilst on the one side we deal with these municipalities that have applied for the National Treasury Debt Relief, we're also dealing with significant challenges from a metro perspective. So what we've seen over the last couple of years, which we've not seen in the historical trend up to March 2022, is a significant shortfall of payment from the metros. And that's predominantly between Tshwane and City of Johannesburg. From a Ekurhuleni perspective, you're also seeing late payments that are coming through, and those amounts are growing. So if you look at where we are in the current financial year, the total overdue debt growth is largely stimulated by the metros, as well as those municipalities that are not paying their current accounts. So from an ESCOM perspective, there's a number of actions that we've taken. So we have a number of credit management processes, notifications, engagements, payment arrangements, etc. Where we give every municipality a fair opportunity to engage and find solutions within to try and solve the problem before it becomes an escalation itself. Thereafter, we look at basically our litigation processes to try and engage through the courts to try and ensure that we get paid. I must point out that not all municipalities are problems. So there's a significant number of municipalities that are paying their current accounts on time and don't have overdue debt. There's about 135 that we would consider fairly good. The overdue debt is within a 60-day range. Some of them might be paying a bit late, but essentially are paying. But we have over 80 that are significantly problematic. And that's what we are challenged with at this point in time. So ESCOM provides also support to the municipalities, so we assist them with the NMD, the notified maximum demand, to try and help them to curb the account, in essence. So if your demand goes over the norm, it comes with a number of penalties, significant higher bills, etc. So by helping them to manage that, it helps them to contain their overall debt itself. From a legal perspective, I've just identified a number of scenarios. So it's a number of cases that we've had in the legal space with different municipalities. Some of the more recent ones, we've been in court with the City of Tshwane, with the City of Johannesburg. Those outcomes continue, and we continue engaging to the court to try and find an amicable solution. Then on the Imfuleni one, I think that made much news, and it ultimately culminated in an agreement between ESCOM as well as Imfuleni for what we call an active partnering program. And the active partnering program will then see ESCOM managing Imfuleni's resources, especially on the revenue management capabilities itself. On the right-hand side, you'll see we do have a number of other municipalities as well, where we provide active partnering. And in essence, the customers remain part and parcel of the municipality, but ESCOM provides the support and engagement with the customers to ensure that service delivery continues, whilst we ensure that ESCOM does get paid for the collections that we get from those areas itself. I think one of the other key areas is looking at what we would call license revocations. Whether you allow these municipalities to continue to participate as having a license to reticulate and provide electricity to these municipalities. So we looked at Section 18A of the ERA, where municipalities would fail to comply with the license agreements, and we would consider the payment of your bulk accounts part of that requirement itself. And in 2018, we then submitted an allegation to NERSA as well to look at these scenarios where a number of municipalities at that time were, in our view, not honoring the requirements in essence and not paying for their bulk accounts itself. NERSA did establish a tribunal at that point in time, and in 2020 there were a number of correspondence that took place, referrals of notices to municipalities to respond to the claims, and it continued. Then in 2021 there's additional requirements from ESCOM which we duly provided. However, unfortunately at this point in time those tribunals did not find any findings and did not conclude on those matters. So that is one of the other opportunities that needs to be looked at as well, in terms of whether or not we need to revoke licenses of municipalities that are not able to pay for their services. I just want to summarize in terms of how then that debt, all of that debt does impact this application. So Mr. Kassam indicated earlier on an amount which we've included in MYPD6 for impairment for debt. And that's debt, not just municipal debt, but all customer segment debt in essence. So you would know that very few organizations or businesses or any entity for that matter is immune to credit risk itself. So we all have, in any organization you would go, you would have credit risk where customers would not pay and fully settle what needs to be paid at the end of the day. We look at the mitigation factors in terms of what's stimulating, what's causing this at the end of the day. There are macroeconomic challenges. There's the post-COVID situation of people affordability, etc. And all of this culminates in terms of customers not being able to settle their debt or pay for their current accounts on a monthly basis itself. Our organization, from a distribution perspective, we are no exception to this credit risk itself. So it is prudent for us to ensure that these impairment costs are provided for and included in the tariff application itself. Now, what we've done is, as much as I've indicated up front, we're currently running at a 95% payment level, which implies that your collections is 5% short. So impairment largely will lie in this 4 to 5% arena in terms of what we should be applying based on the rules at the end of the day. What ESCOM has done is made a conscious decision. So we've opted to limit this application to 2% rather than the 4 or 5% that the process might allow you to apply for. And that is a significant reduction in terms of what we could have asked for at the end of the day. So this will imply an overall 98% collection rate. And for any organization in this environment, electricity collections, that is indeed very stiff to be able to collect 98%. I want to reinforce the fact that this application and impairment is for all customer segments, not just the municipal debt segment. Whilst the municipalities might be a significant contributor, the application is for impairment based on all customer segments itself. This allowance in the MYPD6 application is critical for us to ensure that from a long-term financial sustainability and from a distribution business sustainability, that we are able to ensure that we have sufficient allocations to address the normal operational and the network maintenance items as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Thank you, ESCOM. You've taken an hour. 45 minutes. But we needed that because some of the information we have requested, and it is important for ESCOM to spend time clarifying and providing further information and for the benefit of the public and the ratepayers. So it was necessary that we allow that time for the applicant. At this point in time, I would like to give the members of the Energy Regulator an opportunity to ask questions. I'm going to start with Mr. Mkize.
Thanks, Chairperson, and thanks to the presenters. I think it is also in order that we still congratulate ESCOM for no load shedding now for a reasonable time, and we hope we'll stop counting and take it as a norm. Yeah, with regard to the issue of the RAB, the RAB, which sits around $1 trillion now, I'm just concerned that I'm looking at the issue of the RAB, I'm looking at EAF, EUF, the repair cost and everything. This argument of years, I don't understand the emphasis in terms of years if 20 plus billion on maintenance is still being spent. And then when we're talking of EUF, the energy utilization factor, I would like to know why not impair that portion that you now deem to be non-performing? In other words, the issue that I'd raised some years ago to say, why not re-rate the assets to what they actually are performing, and then and adjust the RAP also accordingly, And the issue of consistency in applying, you're saying, I've heard a statement that it is impossible to get 70% EAF now. And I think not necessarily here and now, but if you can just outline that in the application, because there were also previous decisions that were based on 75%, and the issue of applications being raised, being lodged, which seem to be oblivious of previous decision, we've raised that, and I think let's have an application that is in sync, because you'll have an EAF of 75, then you'll have an EUF of X amount, then you will then have coal utilization of a certain amount. That also then brings me to the question of the oil utilization. I still need to maybe look at the figures, but I've got a challenge there, because the price increase does not seem to be, the 60%, does not seem to be in sync with the general petroleum product increases. If your procurement strategy or processes are not efficient, why should the consumer suffer as a result? And then the other issue I would like to raise, on slide 10, you talk there of cost reflectivity. And it's not coming out clear as to what is lacking there. And I think we should come out also clear from your side. Do you really expect cost reflectivity to manifest in the actual payment by consumers? Because some of the very poor consumers could be in areas where the cost to serve is actually higher. What are you actually saying there? I think it's important to reflect on that. And then on slide 11, why are you excluding your unreliable supply as a key factor for decrease in sales? Because it ties to the issue of price elasticity too, which has been harped on, several times, but it doesn't seem to be coming through. And then on slide 16, there were issues of the NPAs. I don't know, I'm not necessarily there looking for a response here and now, but there was issue raised for the DTIC to weigh in, and I think your thoughts around that, I thought, would come through as we progress with these public hearings. And then with regard to the IPT, just to remind you that NESA had requested ESCOM to do a proper study and submit the results thereof. We are still awaiting that. On slide 24, read together with slides 32 and all of them, you speak there of the variations that are still below benchmark. It will assist to indicate those variations and the benchmark, that is the benchmark variation. I think the issues that I raised earlier on talk to the issue of the re-rating of assets, as I had mentioned. And then I think on the fuel oil, you seem to be saying the volume variance is 89% and price increase is it's the difference. But when you go further, you discuss, then things switch around. It seems like the price increase is 60%, and I didn't get that. And the other issue with that, you seem to be talking a plan that is run efficient. If you've got a lot of trips and starts, then one would tend to question the efficiency then. And we can't be having a situation where, because of trips and starts that are more frequent, then the consumers must bear the brunt of that. I just would like the clarity on that one. Then lastly, on the municipal debt, while I understand your municipal debt situation and not that government is your shareholder, why should paying consumers be made to suffer based on decisions of your shareholder? In other words, their own decisions. What about the socialization of those costs by government coming in instead? And again, this talks to the issue of saying, why lodge an application that seems to be oblivious of past decisions? Because there were decisions made in terms of the exclusion of this in the past, to say, don't let the paying customers suffer because of the non-paying ones. That is all from my side, but there is in the second round, I will read out what one of the attendees wanted ESCOM to attend to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mkhize. You can switch. Advocate Sithole.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thanks to the ESCOM team for their presentation. Chair, I think I had two questions. One of them has been covered by Mr. Mkhize, which related to the impairment of assets. So I won't repeat it. The second question I had was on municipal debt, and there is an indication that there are agency agreements that have been proposed as a means to deal with non-payment of bulk account. I just want to get an understanding as to what has been the impact of these agreements. Have they assisted or not? Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bukul.
Chair, I was going to pass, but I do want to say that on this gas and oil issue, the explanation that has been provided, I think, now does broaden and open up what we have to look at. But I think we're not close to singing from the same hymn book. So we are going to have those engagements and open the books up so that we really align. But I do want to thank you for providing ESCOM the information. And on the same note as Mr. Mkhize, I think there's a number of your slides, like slide 35, for instance. You list a lot of things that have caused the situation to be where it is, but you don't say anything about your operational inefficiency being the one that caused this. And I think in this mode and in these places, for the members of the public to also have some form of sympathy, I think when you come out clearly like you did on slide 46, that NESA didn't do anything about the tribunal, come out clearly as well when you haven't done your part. And on the last one, I mean, efficiently run entities, when they have done a great job like you've done of collecting 98% of your debt, normally just take that 2% from their bottom line, the one that they can collect, not from their same customers. And maybe you should do that because the methodology does not allow you to do what you're doing anyway. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Pukula. I do have some questions as well. They are related, but I think the angle of the questions, just to make sure that you respond to the questions adequately. You'll recall that we asked the question about, the entities such as ESCOM to achieve 75% efficiency target. The response is not direct to that, even for ESCOM to indicate why it cannot achieve that efficiency target that the energy regulator is looking at. Yes, today you have indicated some of the plants that are quite old, and therefore you need to do some maintenance. However, there are some plants and some units that you said are going to come online, but you are not helping the energy regulator to have an appreciation of which units or power plants are not able to take ESCOM to 70% annualized EAF, for instance. And also you are not bringing this within the context of the 8 priority stations and the fact that you yourself have come up with that generation operational recovery plan, so that at least you can give us some comfort to say, at least with these ones, in as much as some are old and therefore are struggling to achieve the level of EAF that could take us to 70% on an annual basis or annualized average. But with regards to the ones, regulator, that we have chosen and want to prioritize for purposes of efficiency and for purposes of high performance, we think that these could at least get us there. Remember, as the regulator, we have to compensate for efficiency. We also have, during this kind of engagements, point out areas of improvements to the regulated entity. Hence, we pose the question, and it does not come out. Can you please indicate to us and bring it to context? You put an application, you tell us about 8 priority stations, you were telling us about units that are coming online, but you are not telling us what is it that will constrain ESCOM from reaching 70% annualized average or reaching 75% annualized average. I'm hoping that now this question is clarified and you will be able to come back to us and respond accordingly on that question. Then the next question, or at least something that we expected, is the production plan. And again, ESCOM, you have not come up on the issue of production plan. Any adjustments, also talking to sales. And remember, this is what we've asked already on the 18th of November in Cape Town. But that is not reflected in here. and we still need to get into that, and also the issue of the necessary adjustments that need to be made once you respond to the questions that are posed by the regulator, also in relation to the EAF. The issue of the drivers or the factors affecting the demand, there's still some gaps there. For instance, Mr. Mkiza spoke about the price elasticity of demand. Already in your application, you've got the NPAs, but you are not reflecting what is the driver for the lower demand or the lower sales, or what affects the demand. You are not saying that price affects the demand, but you already have 5.7% of the NPAs. And remember, some of them were going to close down certain, factories simply because of the price. But when the price was negotiated at a particular level, then they were able to buy and at least guarantee ESCOM of certain sales volumes from ESCOM. Why is that this is not reflected as one of the factors that affect the demand? Are you saying that price does not affect the demand at all? That even if 36% or 40% were to be implemented, people will still consume the same level of energy? Are we saying so? And what about the alternatives? Are we also ignoring that there are alternatives and people are not buying as much as they used to because now they are supplementing with other alternative technologies that are available? Is that also not, even if it's not full substitution, but the partial substitution to the extent that there are certain consumption or volumes that are consumed through other technologies? Why is that not coming up? I think that is all from my side. Over to you, ESCOM.
Thank you, Chair and members. I'll ask Riaz to deal with active partnering and the questions around arrear debts and payment levels, and then we'll go into more of the questions around the EAF, the EUF, the RAB, which Brad will touch on. Riaz?
Thank you very much, Mr. Kasim. And the first question was directed around customers paying for old government decisions. So I just want to ensure that we understand the impairment provision is for debt in the current financial year, not for previous years. So any write-offs, decisions around write-offs, etc., is already impaired for in our books. So you're not writing it off against the income statement. So there's no income statement impact in any of those, right? So the impairment needs to be seen in the context of this, that a customer is paying almost like his insurance, if you want to call it, that tomorrow my company might close down, tomorrow I might pass away, and I would leave that debt. And therefore that debt will not be settled. And therefore this provision is actually like that insurance policy that comes together to assist in terms of paying off that. So every customer that is paying for this impairment in their tariff itself is actually making a contribution towards their potential debt write-off in the future. So it needs to be seen in that context.
Sorry, I just want to correct here. There are two things. I think the essence of the question that related to impairment was in relation to the assets that are not performing as expected. I think that's what I heard from both Mr. Mkize and Advocate Sitolo regarding the assets themselves, to say that re-rate or impair the units that are not performing. So it has nothing to do with the impairment on the debt itself. But even with that, you can also touch on the methodology that we are using, whether the methodology that we are using does allow ESCOM to levy impairment on arrear debt. Thank you.
Noted. So the generation part will be covered by my colleagues. Yeah, so the question was around on the municipal debt is why we are oblivious around the decision that was made previously for no provision for impairment for arrear debt. I think that was directly to the municipal debt and the arrear debt assessing. So I just want to recollect that in the previous decision there was a provision. There used to be a provision of 0.5% itself. In the last application, the decision was to give 0%. So it was a decision particularly in that particular period itself. But there was always a provision and allowance for impairment historically itself. So for whatever reason, the decision in the last impairment was to make it zero. And for the explanation that I gave earlier in terms of you would have customers that would pass away. You would have companies that will close down. So impairment is required for those elements itself. It is an expense that we would incur, whether we like it or not. As long as the customer doesn't pay, it will become part of our bottom line expense itself. With regard to the agency agreement, so there's
Is it in the methodology? I do understand how much was granted previously, but to the extent that, just to respond to the concerns raised by the members of the public and all stakeholders. So I just wanted ESCOM at least to respond adequately to that issue of impairment, indicating whether this is provided for in the methodology. That's your point of departure, right? And then you can go to what the previous decisions have done, right? And then the quantum of the previous decision compared to now what ESCOM is asking. If you can just respond in that manner. Thank you.
So if we go back in the previous decisions, I think it was the MYPD4 application to 0.5% provision. In the MYPD5, the provision was 0%, and the application in the current period is 2%. Okay, I think the last component was a suggestion in terms of if you have a 98% collection rate, then you can take the 2% on the bottom line. I'm sure Mr. Caleb will comment on that as well. But from my perspective is that you'd have to have that profit in your bottom line to be able to absorb it itself. So if you look at all of the other elements, in essence, you'd have to have a creation of that bottom line profit to be able to absorb the 2%. Impairment is part of your operating expenses at the end of the day, and therefore comes out as one of those items reducing that profit at the end of the day. Thank you.
Okay, there are quite a few points here. In relation to the RAB, I want to confirm that the performance is taken into account in the calculation of the RAB. There is, when the reevaluation was done, it is adjusted for both physical obsolescence in terms of the age of the plant, but also for functional obsolescence, where they took into account the amount of PCLF and the amount of UCLF. So that is taken into account. It was under the auspices of independent consultants where we did the reevaluation. In terms of why I said we can't achieve 70% by the end of the year, just to make 100% sure we're clear, that is for the year. And I haven't done the exact calculations in my head, but where we are now and the remaining 4 months, there's just no ways we'll get 70 even if we achieve 70 by the end of the year, there's no ways it's going to happen for the annual amount. In terms of the fuel oil utilization, I think if and the prices not being related to the market changes.
Sorry, before you go ahead, remember I've unpacked the question properly where we would like ESCOM to.
I'm still coming to that one too.
Okay, on the EF?
I'm still coming to that.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So in terms of the fuel oil utilization and related to the price and the market, we'll have to come back in writing on that one. I don't have information on that. Similarly, with the maintenance benchmark, I'm not quite sure what additional information we need, so maybe we can liaise outside of this to determine what is required there. Then in terms of the fuel oil price and the differences between the two scenarios I spoke about with the 89% versus 11%, and then the 60-40, the other way around, I was looking at two different scenarios. The one was comparing F19 to the application, and the other one was comparing bring F15 projection to the application. So it was two completely different scenarios, one over just 1 year and the other over 7 years. So that's why the change. In terms of the, okay, let's address the 75%. So the performance we have at the moment must be seen in light of the context. We at this stage, the application we're doing is in line with what we are assuming for EAF. We are not targeting more than 70% at this stage, maybe up to 72%. I can't tell you what we need to get there at this stage. We haven't done that. It is a stretch too far. In terms of where we are now, with the context that I've been through in great detail, we're not targeting 75. That's as simple as I can put it. Sales adjusted. Okay, I think that covers all the questions for generation.
Chair, you just forgot about the act of partner.
Apologies, in haste. So the question was around the act of partnering and the impact it has in terms of collection. So we have a number of act of partnering. So we started off with 2 municipalities, which we did on a pilot basis. It did see an improvement in terms of their payment levels from where they were. The 2 significant ones that have been implemented more recently is Madutia Pofong as well as Mfuleni. So Mfuleni is very recent days, and that will take a bit of time before you get into a maturity phase in terms of collections. Similarly with Maluti itself. However, what would happen essentially is that you would see an improvement on the payment levels. You might not be assured that you get 100% cover of your current account. But the critical component to understand is when you're running an agency agreement is that your electricity-related monies are collected and ring-fenced for electricity-related business. And therefore, that money is then allocated. So if there's a shortfall to pay your current account, there might be underlying issues, for example, energy losses, maybe the tariff is inadequate, etc., etc. So you can then deal with those problems or those contributors more directly itself. But certainly it's expected to see an increase in the payment levels, and in essence that will contribute towards narrowing down that 5% that we talk about short payment from an overall perspective. The challenge is, however, there are not too many municipalities that are willingly coming forward to sign up active partnering. We have socialized and we've marketed to just about all of the municipalities, especially those that are on our overdue list itself, but the uptake is very small, and we find that after much intervention from government in different spaces itself, there's some agreement that comes out of those engagements itself. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I should add. And coming to the specific question about the specific units and what we're targeting there, the 8 priority units, we're actually not specifically targeting an EAF there. What we're more focusing on is actually megawatts on the bars, you know. So the specific projects there that look at what we're going to get, how many additional megawatts do we get out of it so we can meet demand. That's the real focus of those ones. However, there are some stations that are achieving 75% at the moment, and it's not as simple as saying these can and these can't. Because of the context, the units are still to a certain extent unreliable, so there's a huge amount of variation in it. Thank you.
Chair, so we take your question and come up with more details per power station. We'll do the work and we'll come back as generation. We also linked this to the demand and the production plan. And the arrear debts, we take Mr. Bakula's question into account and looking at that. I think, and then effectively as we come back, it also circles back to Mr. Mkize's questions on what should be in the RAB. So let us do that work and then come back on that, Chair. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Eskom. If you can kindly add those things onto the list that you had in Polokwane, and so that we can see that list, and then also we can be able to see what is it that you have not addressed. All right, thank you very much for your presentation. Oh, sorry. Mr. Pugula has some issues to address in relation to some of the questions posed by the members of the public. Thank you. Over to you, Mr.
Thank you, Chairperson. There's a question from the Matlosana Business Chamber which wants to understand or know what your ESCOM's collection rate in the town extensions like Kuma, Kanana and Tikana, where you are supplying directly. I think that information you can provide to the chamber, because I think one of the people is going to present. And then the other one really is around the strategies that you have used to demand the debt owed, and I think you have provided part of that information, but if there's anything additional from what has been from what you have provided, please make it part of what you'll send to us as in writing. And then the other comment of the member of the public is really around that the people who are adversely affected by these proposed increases are not here. The venue and the radio adverts were not proper, and I think that will be dealt with by Vuelwa and Amanda, who are at the back of the room. The other complaint that we have around the meter and that it was removed, I will give that to ESCOM. They will give you the relevant person to deal with. So those were really the issues raised, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pukula. Mr. Mkis.
Yes, I've got one from Shell Musetlo from my side, a written comment. So ESCOM on a yearly basis increases the price of electricity, yet most consumers are exploited in buying electricity where there are no electricity distributors in rural areas, thus resulting in consumers buying from tuck shops with inflated prices. How will ESCOM help these vulnerable consumers in making sure that there are reliable electricity distributors in rural areas? For example, a vulnerable consumer buys electricity coupon of 200 Rand but pays 220 Rand. ESCOM is aware of this, but they are doing nothing about it. I expect that to be on the closing remarks by ESCOM. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mkize. Mr. Mkize made a point that with some of these questions, if you can touch on them when you're doing your closing remarks. Maybe the other thing that we had forgotten to mention, if you can kindly share these slides with NERSA, and we have already indicated also in Polokwane that you must also provide the responses in writing, even if you're going to touch on them, because the members of the public must have access to what ESCOM has provided to NERSA on the issues that were raised. So from our side, we will then put the information in our website as well as on Facebook and X, so that people can be able to see what the responses are. Thank you again, ESCOM, for the presentation. We now go to take a presentation from the member of the public. We've got Mokhadi Rakhoto. Mokhadi. Do we have Mokhadi, or must we just pass Mokhadi? If we don't have Mokhadi, we are now going to go ahead. This is the second time that we don't have Mokhadi. In Polokwane, we had the name of Mokhadi, and again here. Okay. All right. We are going to now take a presentation from Timothy. Sorry. I'm on the wrong thing. I've got the name of Kabelo Ramokhatali from NUMSA. Hey, that's a mistake. Can we please have the NERSA staff to assist there with the laptops and how to place those things? Thank you, Mr. Mabunda. You've taken about 3 minutes of our time, but thank you for assisting. Try to upload other presentations in time. Thank you. May you please raise your right hand? Good. Please press the mic. Is it on? Right, do you solemnly declare that the evidence you are going to provide to the panel is the truth and the whole truth?
Yes, I do.
Please state your name and your designation at NUMSA.
Okay, now, greetings everyone. My name is Kabelham Khatari. I'm the NUMSA Regional Secretary, Citibank Regional Secretary.
All right, you may start with your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Greetings everyone and to the panel from NIESA and also all the stakeholders, the formations and the civil society, including political parties and other organizations. NUMSA is here to demand a competitive electricity tariff to power the community of Matlosana and our economy. We reject ESCOM's revenue application and resultant tariff increase of 36%, 12% and 9% for the next financial year. It is a well-known fact that no matter how small the electricity tariff increase, it will distress us for the working class and the poor who are already unable to afford electricity at its current rate. This will deepen the crisis for industries, particularly small to medium business, by making electricity costlier. As a result of this unaffordable tariffs, masked as a cost-reflective tariffs, we are likely to see more retrenchments and worsening deindustrialization of the country, which will be very difficult to recover from. NUMSA in this submission want to be on record that these unaffordable and uncompetitive tariffs are not only wrong and untimely, they have become unnecessary ammunition against the job security of the workers, leaving employers with no option but to issue a Section 189 retrenchment notices. NUMSA in the last quarter of this year has been overwhelmed by these retrenchments, and across all economy rationale, employers advance to justify this retrenchment. The cost of electricity has been the issue. It has been the issue in Glencoe, Mercedes-Benz South Africa, ArcelorMittal, Ford, and the list is long from big to small and medium-sized companies. Additional, NUMSA discussions with foundries owners have indicated that ESCOM unsustainable tariffs have a serious impact on this operation, which will lead to a point of the plant closures due to exorbitant tariff increase. As a union that represents workers in City-Bend region and across Vanderbilt Park, we must be on record that given the serious level of deindustrialization that have taken place in City-Bend, NUMSA region, which covers Vanderbilt Park, Vereeniging, Northwest, and Matlosana, it makes us emotional that very Vanderbilt of the then Nationalist Party, who formed and created ESCOM in 1923 and later created ISCO in 1929, which is ArcelorMittal South Africa today, was very sober when created these two strategic state-owned companies. His open mission was to champion manufacturing and industrialization at the back of the cheap competitive electricity tariffs to benefit the then African folk. What is extremely irritating is that in this day and age in South Africa, at the back of the democratic government having lost election as a result of poverty, unemployment, and inequality, the very government decide to consciously impose exorbitant electricity tariffs through its institution ESCOM at the national level by imposing 36% tariff increase for ESCOM customers and 44% tariffs increase for municipality customers for the first year of this application. For the second year, they are applying for a 12% tariff increase for ESCOM customers and 3% increase for municipality customers. Clearly, what we are dealing with here is a self-imposed generated crisis by the state to further worsen the condition of the working class by deindustrializing the country, plugging the country further back to extreme level of unemployment and inequality. There is no company that will afford this exorbitant tariffs increase in City-Bend, in ArcelorMittal, South Africa, which is a strategic company for the steel industry in the country for both upstream and downstream. If you take ArcelorMittal, South Africa, for example, as we speak, their electricity cost for the current year is already 30% too high, and if this tariff increase are to be approved and implemented, it will result in 1.1 billion increase, which is completely unsustainable for ArcelorMittal South Africa and the rest of the economy. Now, I want to take you into confidence that recently we had a strike in ArcelorMittal where we were fighting the retrenchment, where the company retrenched 150 employees. So, indeed, this, if this increase will be approved, it's going to be a very difficult for ArcelorMittal to continue and other companies to continue to trade. If this is the case for ArcelorMittal South Africa, which is the upstream, how much more inaccessible will this electricity be for the companies in the downstream industry and the forward and backward linkage in the economy? NUMSA as a union continues to support the movement from fossil fuels to renewables, but we have been very clear that there must be a just transition. that must happen at the pace and at the cost our country can afford. That is why we firmly believe that we are justifying in calling on NESA to take a stand to reject this exorbitant, expensive tariff application. It is our firm view that the NESA must take a very firm stand in very interest of the people by defending their economy and their job by granting ESCOM these exorbitant tariffs, especially because what is clear is that the ANC government and this GNU are still, especially because are still following the wrong path and direction of being captured by the green environmentalists and the green lobbyists, whose priorities is to defend the economy of the development world. Yet, our own economy must be at the one that must be sacrificed at a time when Trump has publicly announced that he is going to build a new power station to guarantee a reality supplier of electricity to the economy of the USA. Anyone who cares about the plight of the poor, whose plight can only be changed by growing the USA economy, cannot suffocate the SA economy by imposing exorbitant electricity tariffs. Simultaneously, at the same time, when the USA is threatening to impose economic tariffs across the world, with South Africa included. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ramokhatali. I just want to check from my colleagues if there's any questions, starting with Ms. Simani. Any question? Put it before Khalipans.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I'm fine.
Thank you. Mr. Mkhize.
Thanks. If just one thing from my side, if I'm not mistaken, NUMSA is also a labor movement labor organization within ESCOM. Was there any consultation with your members at ESCOM in terms of this presentation? That's the only question I have.
Thank you very much, Advocate Sitole. All right, thank you. Just two things for me. You made mention of ESCOM, that ESCOM has to come up with a competitive tariff. What do you mean by that? Do you have any sort of guidance or idea of what competitive tariff level does NUMSA have in mind and how that was arrived at? If perhaps you do have some sort of guidance as to what is the competitive tariff level that you are looking at or that you have in mind. And then the second thing that I just wanted to find out, it relates to the point that you made about ArcelorMittal, stating that they won't be able to absorb the 36%. It's too high because their electricity cost is already high at 30%. What do you say about the fact that ESCOM has already presented to the energy regulator stating that when it makes an assessment of the sensitivity of industrial customers to price, they believe that industrial customers are not sensitive to price. Their findings are that they are price inelastic, meaning that the demand would not change even if the price goes up. So that's the inelasticity analysis that they made when it comes to industrial customers. What are you saying with your point now about ArcelorMittal, where you say that with them they will not be able to absorb it? Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you very much for the questions. I missed the first question, but I think the question was on the 6th to ask NUMSA as whether, since NUMSA is a organized labor or a labor movement within ESCOM, was it a proper consultation with its members? The consultation, if that was a question, the consultation was between the leadership and at the plant level, and also at the regional level and the national level. But it was our responsibility as an organization to meet with our members, called general meetings, and hence we formulated this position. So this position is not a personal, it's not based on a personal, individual perspective, but it was canvassed and mandated by the members. So that's basically that. Now, coming to the cost that will be competitive, I think as a organized labor, and which the organizational labor that actually representing the working class and the working people. As a trade union, and we are familiar with the trends in terms of our engagements with various companies, including ESCOM, as also the company when it comes to the wage negotiation, etc. We think that if you can also do some research, nowadays when we negotiate, most of the companies, including ESCOM, they don't want to pay an increase. We're talking about the wage increase to the workers. The maximum, if I may give you the maximum average, is 5.5%. That's what we normally get as the employee when we are negotiating for workers, unless if we pursue that or pursue the employer through a strike. That's where the employer will be threatened and maybe move to 6.5%. And we're not going to give you exact amount, because really when we are saying no, something that is a price that will be affordable, we are taking into consideration that there are people that are actually living or are depending on the grants, 350, and there are those employees who are getting pensions like trainees and grandfathers. So those individuals cannot afford with the current, and we're talking about the current tariffs, price of the electricity, they cannot afford. Hence, they are attempt from the government to now come with through ESCOM, coming up with the strategies and tactics to register new, giving the customer the numbers, etc. It is because the people that can't afford the electricity. Hence, we are saying we don't think that really we can give you that. I think it can be achieved that through engagement of the unemployed citizen. So based on ArcelorMittal, we dispute the fact that, and we're not in those engagements with ESCOM and those companies, but we totally dispute the fact that the companies, especially in the engineering, motor, auto, tire, and rubber, and generally, would not really be comfortable with the current proposed electricity tariffs. Reason being that there has been retrenchment, not only in ArcelorMittal. I've mentioned Mercedes-Benz, BMW, and other companies. Here in Matosane, if you know the old industrial area, we call it sites, and the Uraniaville is now becoming a ghost industrial area, including old industrial area, as we know, sites. Only few companies exist. Most of the companies have been closed down. Some have been liquidated. So we cannot really say now the companies are comfortable. We reject that. In ArcelorMittal, we do have that presentation. We had to intervene with the government to say, no, can you subsidize ArcelorMittal? Hence, in the last retrenchment, which targets Newcastle and Vereeniging, we managed to engage with the government. They made that just a commitment in terms of electricity and the transportation of ESCOM and scrap tax. So basically, it is not true from where we are standing that indeed the companies are comfortable with the current proposed, unless proven otherwise. But from the companies that were engaging, one of the reasons they cite in the Section 189 consultation is that the cost of electricity, and there's a company in Fanaville Park dealing with plastic, it's a plastic company. That company in the last financial year, they cited the fact that they want to introduce what you normally call a new shift pattern, and they were targeting hours to say no, workers will not ordinarily work from 6 and then up to, until in the afternoon. They want to now configure their shift pattern. Reason being that they call it the peak hours, that ESCOM electricity now the cost is high. So every company that we're engaging during Section 189, electricity is one of the factors that they are considering to be a factor for retrenchment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nomsa. Thank you very much for your time and the responses. We now move on to the next presenter, Renew Consulting. All right, may you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you're going to provide to the panel is the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
Thank you. May you please state your name at Renew Consulting?
Tom Diedrichs, owner of Renew Consulting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and everybody here today. And thank you very much for the opportunity last week as well. Just a little bit about myself and why I came to present today. I've been working with utilities since 2008 and have billed and seen the impact of electricity accounts on many people since 2008, and I think I do have a very good understanding of what these meetings and the tariff increases end up at the end of the day. So last week we discussed the discrepancies in tariff between different regions and so on and so forth, and I thought today what I would like to give to NASHA and ESCOM is, I think, one of the more, maybe a technical reason, but also in my opinion, the biggest reason why ESCOM can't afford any increases in their tariffs. So, first of all, I just quickly want to show you, and I know it's technical and it's numbers and so on and so forth, but what happens is the decisions that get made here today eventually end up on things that look like this: bills, accounts. And I took a real client that sits in Ekurhuleni and just give you an indication of what the impact would be in the tariffs, or that was the actual current financial tariffs this year for a specific customer. So you would see there that this customer, a light industrial customer, in Ekurhuleni, they would pay around about 2 million rand at a cost of 341 rand a kilowatt hour. If they paid ESCOM, the amount would have been 1.6 million rand at 2.69 per kilowatt hour. So you can see there that the profit that Ekurhuleni would make on a customer like this would be around about 1.61 rand. But even if on the ESCOM tariffs, and I'll get to it a bit later on my single tariff solution for the entire country, even on a single tariff, if the ESCOM tariffs were applied across the country and everybody were to pay that, the municipality would still make an 89 cents profit on this customer's account, or a 49% over recovery. But now to get to the reason why I believe that Eskom cannot afford a 1% increase in the current tariffs. So this customer, it's a real customer. I'm willing to take anybody there to go and have a look, and I'm willing to share the accounts and so on and so forth. But this customer installed a solar solution within the year. They ended up paying Ekurhuleni 1.149 million instead of the 2.3 million or 2.03 million rand that they would have paid. So a single customer that installed solar and a battery system saved 881,000 rand in a single financial year. So the impact on this is they've already saved. So that cost-saving element is already there. So if you were to go, and I were to go to any customers in that area, I would say, look, is this your consumption? Is this what you're using? Is this what is happening? And I can not just promise this, but we're physically saving customers 881,000 a year. I also then applied the exact same thing at Eskom tariff. So in other words, what would have happened to the Eskom tariffs. So if this was an Eskom customer in Eskom area on a mini-flex tariff, they would have paid Eskom 1.6 million rand. After this solar system was installed, they would have ended up paying Eskom 713,000 rand, a cost saving of 887,000 rand. So if we take into consideration the finance cost, because obviously solar is not for free, but the finance cost for this specific system was about 600,000 rand a year. So that means it's at the current tariffs, at the current state, over a 10-year period, they would save 2.8 million rand if Eskom never increased their tariffs again. But they would also save 280,000 rand a year after they paid for the system. And this is not even taken into consideration the numerous solar benefits and the tax incentives and many other financial incentives on solar systems. So and the reason why I think, even though this is a lot of facts and figures, the reason why this is important for Eskom to really understand is you have competitors out there currently in the market. You used to be the only supplier of electricity in town, the only cowboy in town. But now it's the wild, wild west, and there's many other cowboys around. And your price, all of a sudden, is becoming more or less and less competitive and more expensive, while your competitors can sell electricity for less and less. So if you were to increase your tariff with even 1%, I mean, I would still be able to go to this customer and tell them, look, I'm going to save you 280,000 rand a year. If you increase it with 36%, I mean, it just becomes easier to sell. You are driving the renewable industry to a great extent, but at the same time, you are making yourself unaffordable. Now, the problem with this is that these people that can afford solar systems, I can guarantee you, is also the people that's currently paying you. The majority of customers that is being able to, or that is able to afford electricity and that is able to pay it, is also the customers that can go to the bank and apply for these systems. I just want to go back one slide, and I really want you to have a look at the impact on your business. So one customer, one solar system would cost Eskom 800,000 rand in revenue a year. And now we're sitting here and we are debating increases in electricity tariffs, which is just going to drive the paying customer away from Eskom at a much faster rate. So I do think that we need to have a completely new look and a completely different look at the way that you are approaching energy. And again, like I said in my proposals last week, if Eskom becomes part of the solution and they sell the same power saving things on to the customers, or if they if this becomes part of the solution, then that's a different thing. Or for example, at your indigent level, again, the advantage of this industry is it is creating jobs where everything else is taking away jobs. It is, and I think if ESCOM embraces this rather than just increase their tariffs, I think it would change things quite significantly. And then, okay, so I've showed that. Then the other, obviously, and I know ESCOM has spoken about this, but the elephant in the room is the municipal debt. And my proposed solution, even though I know that there's political factors involved that would make it extremely difficult, is a uniform cost-reflective tariff for every single type of customer in the country. Like I've showed earlier, if ESCOM tariffs were applied in Ekurhuleni, in City Power, there would still be significant profits made in those municipalities. I know it is very difficult and each municipality has budgets and so on and so forth, but the ghost town that Nomsa just mentioned, a large portion of that is because people purchase properties in ESCOM direct areas because of the cheaper tariffs. So that means if you have a town, especially smaller towns that's got more expensive tariffs, all of a sudden, a year or 2 years down the line, they start losing more and more small industrial or medium industrial businesses, having a catastrophic effect on that business, on that municipality's income, on the overall health of that municipality, because businesses are moving away because of the cost of electricity. If we had a uniform cost of electricity across the country for each different consumer, it would change that completely so that you don't turn towns into ghost towns, so that your municipalities won't all of a sudden become empty because of the cost of electricity. I also suggest strict enforcement of non-payment, as again I know there's a lot of political things here, but municipalities currently, to bring them to task is very difficult. They're not being held accountable for their non-payment, and that has got a crippling effect on the ESCOM debt. So interestingly enough, the national rules for licensables and distribution areas of supply can be found on their website. And if you go through all of the rules and regulation for the customers and for municipalities, you'll find something that looks a lot like this. There's a whole the actual license agreement between the municipalities and NASHA. So this is available on NASHA's website, so it's not a secret. All the licenses between the license departments have got a license that you can find on NASHA's website. But if you look at, and I didn't put the whole thing up because it's too much to go through, but there's legal conditions, financial conditions, and technical conditions for each municipality to adhere to. And I think ESCOM did mention this, but I believe that many municipalities, especially municipalities like Ekurhuleni, is in a very big breach of this license agreement. So, like they say, there's no ring fence of the financial electricity accounts as is required by the license agreement. There's many of these issues, if you read it, that they don't adhere to. The technical conditions, and I just want to give you an example of Ekurhuleni's technical conditions. A few years ago, one of their substations burned down, and we found the book where they need to note everything that's been done in that substation. And all the notes was, we don't have tools, we don't have money, the substation is going to burn down, the substation is going to burn down, and then eventually the substation burned down. So if you look at the technical conditions of a municipality, these municipalities, they don't adhere to the technical regulations like ESCOM does, and what this is creating is many areas of blackouts. In other words, we don't have load shedding, but you might live in an area area where you're in a municipality that's got, that is under these conditions, or that's not looking after their things, now all of a sudden, while the rest of the country, thank goodness, have electricity, you don't. Your business is stuck without electricity for 2 weeks or 3 weeks because the transformer burned down and so on. So that transformer that burned down, it took Mfuleni 4 weeks to repair it, and there was many customers that went without being able to produce a single item in those 4 weeks. So again, the cost impact on this going forward is just going to increase. And I can take you to a lot of these municipalities and I can show you the infrastructure is deteriorating at a rate that even if Eskom were to take over, they wouldn't want to, because that of the state of that infrastructure in that municipality. So my suggestion again was that Eskom gets the opportunity, if a municipality does not pay or cannot pay their accounts, that every single month, as part of the license agreement, a portion of those clients become Eskom Direct under the new tariff. So eventually, over a period, that will disappear by itself, and those customers can go over to Eskom and have access to a utility that will pay and will look after them. The rest of the slide that I'll share with Nasha and I'll make available. But again, of the more than 200 municipalities that there was, only 66 submitted a cost of supply study. But all of those that haven't supplied the cost of supply studies are still charging the tariffs on the national thing, or most of them. And it's creating a confusion of when or who's going to get what credits and so on and so forth. So I really think that we can't just leave this, and we need to urgently look at this before it becomes too late, and before the only people that can produce electricity or have a business is the people that can afford renewable energy. So, yeah, thanks. That's it from me. Thanks, man.
Thank you very much, Mr. Diedericks. Ms. Sithole has a question. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thanks to you, Mr. Diedericks. One point of clarity. I think you have made proposals in your presentation in terms of how Eskom should deal with municipal debts. You have mentioned that there should be a strict enforcement of non-payment and also holding municipality accountable and imposing penalties or administrative intervention. But what I am missing is, what are you proposing Eskom should do in relation to the 90 billion that is already owed to Eskom? If you can just try and comment on that or give us input in relation to that, I'll appreciate it. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Advocate Sithole. The next question is from Mr. Mkhize. Mr. Mkhize.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Mr. Diedericks. I would just like to know, it's just a clarity-seeking question from my side. We've spoken about price elasticity. And from your side, are you emphasizing that the price elasticity, when Eskom looks at price elasticity, they must also take into consideration how the migration, because people still use electric, but they will migrate to renewables because of the price making alternatives more competitive. Am I understanding correctly that you say they're making the substitutes more competitive price-wise?
Okay, thanks. So on the historical debt of 90 billion rand, I think that is a very difficult thing, because Eskom currently took over the bank account of Mfuleni. They have seized all the assets and so on. I'm not sure how much is in the bank account of Mfuleni that Eskom seized, but I know it wasn't the 8 billion rand that was owed. I think it was something like 200 or 300 million rand at most. So Unfortunately, I think the historical debt is going to have to be taken over by government. It is going to be a very difficult thing, but these municipalities will have absolutely no way of paying the historical debt. That money isn't there, and there isn't a place where they can go, or the ESCOM doesn't have any further things to attach. They don't have any further alternatives. So I do unfortunately think that the taxpayer is going to, in the long run, end up paying for that. But I do think we need to stop the 90 billion rand from becoming 190 billion rand or so on. So if we can at least put a line in the sand and stop it from escalating further, I think that would help a lot. I hope that answers. And then on the price elasticity, I think there's two parts to it. Yes, I think ESCOM absolutely needs to embrace the cost benefit of some renewable energies in their tariff structures and in their prices. One of the examples that I thought about is we speak about the indigent tariffs and how desperately, and we've heard so many people at Polokwane and at other places say that they don't even yet have access to the 50 free basic units of electricity and so on. But what is scary is that we're putting up that we need to give these people electricity that they have the right to, and we absolutely do. But we make it part of the budget. But we can, at the same time, I haven't seen ESCOM present to say, look, we are going to spend so many billion rand on indigent electricity over the next years. But we have found that if we put in renewable energy and storage systems for that electricity, we are going to create X jobs and reduce the cost to the taxpayer over the next 10 to 20 years in that area. So I think that is the one part where I think they can incorporate the price elasticity. And then the other part to answer, which I hope answers, is they say that their prices are elastic. And again, I don't want to answer last week's question, but I've been part of the same meetings that NUMSA has and seen so many customers that said, look, we cannot afford it, we need discount, or we need. But for many people that I'm presenting that is elastic in ESCOM's view, they are also business people, and if I present them, look, you can save 200,000 rand a year, or 300,000, or $1 million, or 2 million, they're going to take that option, and the remaining electricity of ESCOM is just going to be more expensive. So I don't think that they've taken the impact that this is going to have into consideration. So I hope that answers it to an extent.
Thank you very much. We thank you for your time and the responses that you provided. Please share the presentation with NERSA. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now proceeding to the next presenter, which is the member of the public. We've got the name of Simon Mukwena. Simon Mukwena, do we have? All right, just to indicate that Flora Fojeka was the one who was supposed to present from Build One South Africa, but she is not here. So we are now proceeding to the next one. May you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you're going to provide to the panel is the truth and the whole truth?
I do. Thank you. Thank you very much.
No, we didn't hear you. Are you going to, do you declare that you are going to speak the truth and the whole truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you very much. May you please state your name and the community or constituency that you are representing, or the views that you are going to state today are for which community?
Okay, my name is Simon Mukwena. I'm from Ugasi community in Madibeng.
Okay, you may proceed then with the presentation. You only have 15 minutes.
All right, thank you. Good. Thank you, Honorable Chair. My name is Simon Mukwena, and I'm here today with the community members of Ugasi in Madibeng municipality as concerned community member to share our thoughts, the proposed tariff raise. The background stated clearly is, as we all know, that the current tariff rates have been a significant burden on our community and the society at large. Many of us struggle to make ends meet, and the higher tariff rates only exacerbate the problem. As the community of Okasi, we believe it is essential that we have a say in the tariff rates that affect our daily lives. The key concern, our key concern regarding the proposed tariff rates are affordability. The proposed tariff rates are still unaffordable for many members of our community. We urge the panel to consider the impact of these rates on our lower income households. And a lack of transparency. The tariff rates process lack transparency, making it difficult for the community members to understand how the rates are determined. We request that the panel provide more transparency in the tariff setting process. The impact on the local businesses. The higher tariff rates will negatively impact the local businesses, leading to job losses and economic instability. We ask the panel to consider the impact of the tariff rates on the local businesses. Okay, we have the potential reason why municipality failed to deliver. The poor planning and budgeting can lead to inadequate resource allocation, resulting in service delivery failure. A municipality may lack the necessary skills, expertise, and resource to effectively manage and deliver services. Corruption and mismanagement and maladministration can lead to the misallocation of the resource, resulting in this delivery failure. An ongoing middleman within municipality, also known as entrepreneurs or brokers, who may be exploiting or manipulating the system. The lack of accountability mechanism can enable poor performance and corruption, leading to the service delivery failure. The municipality failed to conduct public participation process to inform and consult with the public about the proposed increase. So what NERSA can fail is a lack of enforcement by NERSA, inadequate oversight. NERSA may not provide adequate oversight of municipality, enabling them to fail in their responsibility. Conflict of interest. NERSA officials may have conflict of interest, compromising the ability to regulate municipality effectively. In conclusion, we ask the panel to consider concern and recommendation of the community. We need the tariff rates that are fair, transparent, affordable. We believe that by working together, we can find a solution that benefits everyone. We thank you.
Thank you very much for your input. Don't think that there are any questions. I think the presentation was very clear. We don't have any questions, but we take the concerns that you've stated to heart, and also the cry that you have with regards to how NERSA conducts its due diligence and give effect to its mandate. We thank you very much.
Thank you.
For raising that. Thank you. We now moving on to the next presenter, which is the presentation from the DA, Democratic Alliance. The DA is not available for presentation. Would you want to come forward and do the presentation? Do we have the person from the DA who will represent the Democratic Alliance to do the presentation? Those people that are going to present for the DA, they can come forward. right. May you please raise your right hand, sir? Do you have any objection in taking the oath?
No.
Thank you.
So help me God.
No, sorry, the head.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. Okay, thank you. May you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you're going to provide to the panel is the truth and the whole truth?
Yes.
Okay, you can speak here on the mic so that we
Yes.
get that on record.
Yes. So help me God.
Thank you very much. Can you please state your name for the record?
Johannes Legransie, I'm from the DA.
Thank you very much. May I also swear in your colleague? Okay. May you please raise your right hand, ma'am? Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you're going to provide to the panel is the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and your designation in the Democratic Alliance.
Marita Kutsi, I'm a councillor.
Thank you. May we go to the next one? Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you're going to provide to the panel is the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
Please state your name and your designation.
Enrico Jackson, I'm a political activist in the DA.
Thank you. The last one. Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you're going to provide to the panel is the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
Please state your name and your designation.
My name is Tsepo Rampomani and I'm a member of Telefontaine.
All right, thank you. Going to provide you 20 minutes to do your presentation. We increased it by 5 minutes, so we'll give you a total of 20 minutes. Thank you very much. You may start.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yes, I think what we would like to start it off by welcoming this actually NASA here. I think it's very, very important that we have to understand the difference between a debate and an argument. To date, we have not an argument because an argument is about who is right. But a debate is what is right. And I want you to understand where we're coming from. First of all, if you're looking at Eskom, we noticed in the last financial couple of years, Eskom do have a qualified audit report. That's not very good. The kind of actions we would like to say today, we actually reject this proposed 36 increase due to the following reasons. If we're looking at currently at a consumer price index, is 4.5%. If we're looking at the inflation rate, it's 5.5%. Now I'm going to show you, and I can have it here, Eskom tariff increases. Or let's go back. Eskom internally, they come to an agreement with their salaries people, their employees, for the next 3 years on a 7% increase for salaries. But they're charging us 36. They're also the main problem with Eskom is the coal purchases. Coal purchases at Eskom is actually currently at 38% of the total expenditure. And if you're looking at the 5 companies that are buying coal, Eskom is buying coal from Anglo, Exxaro, Glencore, Sasol, and minor small business, also Extrata. And then you will know, if you're looking at all these coal stations, especially Exxaro, the last calculated financial profit was, I think, 19 billion. So all these coal mines are making massive increases, massive profits. But Eskom, who's got a monopoly, cannot perform. And I think this is a very concern. My question to you is actually very straightforward. If you're going to get this 36% increase, what are you going to do with it? Is it going to be capital or maintenance? If you're saying to me it's going to be capital, I will say no. You're misleading this house. Because let us look at what the current situation in South Africa is. We've got 39,000 megawatt generated by coal and hydro. Then we've got another 12,000 megawatt provided by gas, fuel and generators. So exclude it. Let's talk about 39,000 megawatt that we can produce. it's clear if you're talking about only 60%, we only get 24,000 megawatt we can locally produce. So what is happening to the other units? I've been internal audit for 3 years in Eskom. I've done Kendall, Kriel, Matla, Letaba, Duduva, Tutuka, Majuba's a colliery, Matumba, and now Kusile. The problem is, if you say capital, I'm going to laugh at you. Because currently there was a benchmark, or not a benchmark, a profound statement on the 10th of June by President Cyril Ramaphosa, who allowed now 100 megawatt private initiative. And that is a game changer, ladies and gentlemen, which means at this particular point in time, and I've checked the statistics, 6 months ago, our local private electricity by solar was already at 4,500 megawatt, which means in 1 year, actually in 18 months, we've come to the conclusion that private sector is already at 10-11%. So within the next 5 years, we're going to have a situation where Eskom is only 50% of the market. So I think it's very, very important that NESA and Eskom have to make a clear decision and say, listen, ladies and gentlemen, you're running down a dead-end street. Let's take you to another point. How good is Eskom? In 2007, they built Medupi and Kusile. Budgeted 79 billion, 81 billion. Initial cost over 12 years is 234 billion. I'm going to repeat. In 2007, Medupi and Kusile was supposed to be built for 79 and 81 billion. Eventually, after 12 years, 234 billion. Surely the problem and the elephant in the room is Eskom, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to conclude. Solar power is going to be the new person. And Eskom cannot do the job. I would like to say the following. Eskom is pricing themselves out of the market. I just want to give you Klerksdorp, Matlosana municipality, 116,000 accounts going out every month. Only 30,000 accounts being paid. 20,000 registered indigents. It means 65,000 people is not paying even a cent at all. So what you're doing now, you're forcing to the good payers to install solar. So there's no future for Eskom. So I think we have to make a tough decision, and I would like to align myself with all former speakers over here and said Eskom cannot do the South African ratepayer or the eventual end holder a favor. This is not affordable. No one can afford it. I rest my case so far. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Anyone else who's going to present? Okay, you are done with the presentation?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm trying to speak to the heart and conscience of both NERSA and Eskom. I hope you still have that heart and a conscience. Ordinary South Africans cannot be expected to carry the burden of the rampant corruption and mismanagement that has been so prevalent at Eskom. According to independent estimates, electricity prices have grown by more than 450% since 2008, a tariff increase that is 6 times higher than the inflation rate. My questions to you, both NERSA and Eskom, where it is appropriate, are on behalf of the already poverty-stricken rural communities. I haven't heard anybody talking about the rural communities today. Are you aware that children in rural areas do not attend school due to the cost of transport and the fact that parents cannot afford school uniforms. How can they possibly afford such an absurd increase in electricity if they cannot provide for these basic necessities? Do you know that in some areas in the Northwest Province, holes are dug in dry riverbeds and children are hoisted down to get water? That is what they do because they do not have water running from taps. How will they afford to buy water if they, if it's not even an option to buy water? Section 10 of the South African Constitution protects the right to human dignity, and electricity enables individuals to access a basic standard of living, thereby contributing to the realization of human dignity. Don't you think that, although the right to electricity is not explicitly expressed in the text of the Constitution, it is fundamental for maintaining basic living standards? The cost of living is already a social disaster in these areas, especially for the unemployed. Do you think it will be fair to have to choose between putting food on the table and keeping the lights on? South Africans are already struggling with a high cost of living, and the double-digit increase coupled with a further 4% debt reduction will further drive them into a life of poverty. This debt reduction cost is essentially a punitive tax on residents to recoup what Eskom failed to make in its revenue last year. Can you really, with a clear conscience, approve this increase and let the be the direct reason for more people suffering, going to bed hungry, and children suffering from malnutrition? Don't you think that South Africa should revise this tariff application methodologies so that consumers, especially unemployed and impoverished people, are protected against exorbitant increases? Why don't you hold Eskom accountable, that's for NERSA, when it does not deliver efficient services or mismanages funds, and be transparent about costs associated with its process? Access to electricity allows people to engage in income-generating activities, reducing poverty and improving their economic status. Instead of addressing the institutional challenges that Eskom faces and providing tangible reforms to the current energy crisis, the government seems determined to pass the cost onto South Africans through constant and endless billion-rand bailouts and the NERSA-approved increases. I want to say one thing that you must understand. Rural communities are poor. They are not stupid. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We are living in extraordinary times. The economic struggles facing South Africa today are undeniable. Rising unemployment, surging inflation, and cost of living crises that grows more severe by the day. Millions of households are already stretched beyond their limits. And now they are being asked to pay even more for a basic service like electricity. It is hard to reconcile this proposal with the daily reality of most South Africans. For many, electricity is not just about convenience, it's about survival. It powers essential appliances for cooking, heating, education, and safety. Increasing tariffs by 36% will plunge more families into darkness, literally and figuratively. Our Constitution guarantees the right to dignity according to Section 10. and equality according to Section 9, as well as the right to access basic services, including electricity. These rights are not aspirational. There are obligations placed on all organs of states and entities like ESCOM. The increase will disproportionately harm vulnerable and low-income households, deepening inequality and undermining the right to dignity. Why should South Africans pay more for services that is unreliable, insufficient, and riddled with corruption? Why the people did not create this crisis? Why are they the ones being asked to pay for it? The impact of these increases will ripple across society. From ordinary households, it will mean sacrificing other essentials to keep the lights on. It will widen the gap between those who can afford basic services and those who cannot. For businesses, particularly small and medium enterprises, it will mean increased operational costs, reduced profitability, and even closure in a country already struggling with unemployment. This is not just an economic issue, it's a humanitarian issue. The proposal forces us to ask, whose interests are being prioritized here? Is it the people of South Africa who already face immense hardships, or is it inefficient, bloated institution that has failed time and time again to deliver what they promised? Instead of squeezing more out of citizens, ESCOM and NERSA should focus on cleaning house, cut waste, address corruption, and ensure that those who owe ESCOM pay their fair share. The public has already given enough, and it's time for ESCOM to do its part. South Africans are resilient, but resilience is not an excuse to keep pushing people beyond their limits. We need leaders and institutions that understand our struggles and work to elevate them, not add to them. Rejecting the increase would send a powerful message that the needs and dignity of the people come first, and that we will no longer accept being burdened with the consequences of mismanagement and inefficiency. I urge you to think not just about ESCOM's financial stability, but about the stability of our homes, our communities, and our economy. Reject this tariff increase and work with us to find solutions that are fair, sustainable, and just. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You now have 4 minutes left.
Okay.
You may proceed.
Good day, everyone. I'm one of the residents of Stilfontein. I would speak on behalf of Stilfontein. And thank you for the opportunity to speak about the proposed 40% electricity tariff increase, which will have devastating consequences for our community. Matlosana, and particularly Stilfontein, is a community built around mining, but the closure of the mines has left us grappling with severe poverty and unemployment. Many residents have no stable income, and some have resorted to illegal mining to survive. This proposed tariff increase will push already struggling households and small businesses to the brink. For example, in our community, many families live on less than SASSA grants per month. How will they afford electricity if prices rise by 40%? They simply won't. Families will resort to unsafe alternatives. Impact on business and the economy. Small businesses are the lifeline of our struggling local economy, yet they are already burdened by high costs. A steep tariff increase would force many to close, leading to further job losses. Even worse, illegal mining, which has surged due to unemployment, will likely rise further. This is not just an economic issue, but a safety and social stability issue for our region. While ESCOM needs revenue, this must not come at the expense of South Africans already living in hardship. ESCOM's inefficiencies, corruption, and mismanagement must be addressed as a priority. Communities like Matlosana cannot keep paying for failures they did not cause. Recommendation, I propose the following: implement tariff increases gradually to give communities time to adjust. Hold ESCOM accountable for operational improvements and ensure public transparency in its finances. Invest in renewable energy solutions that are more affordable and accessible to vulnerable communities like ours. This increase is unadjustable for a community already fighting to survive. As the DA, we reject the 40% tariff hike. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Democratic Alliance. We thank you for your time and for the presentation and all of the suggestions that you made. Thank you. We don't have the copies of what the others have presented. All right, at this point, I would like to invite the next presenter, which is Matlosana Business Chamber. I've got the name of Johan Oosthuizen.
Thank you, Chair.
All right, may you please raise your right hand, sir? Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you're going to provide to the panel is the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
Thank you. May you please state your name and your designation at Matlosana Business Chamber?
I'm Johan Oosthuizen. I'm the chairperson of the Matlosana Business Chamber.
All right, you may start with your presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think this morning we have heard basically the same thing over and over again, that we're all against the increase and the exorbitant increase. There's an old saying that states that it is not the person who make it possible to distribute electricity that's making money. That's the person who's reading the meters, the person who has invented the meter, so that the people can pay for that. At this stage, we are sitting with, and we have heard the saying over and over again this morning, that there's an elephant in the room, but I think there's more than two elephants in the room in the China shop, and if there's something is going to happen, it's going to be a fight. In Africa, we talk about when two elephants is struggling, the grass is being tampered and being destroyed. And that is where we are at this stage in our political situation in South Africa, that the two elephants, Eskom and the municipalities, are fighting, and the poor of the poor don't even have access to basic rights at this point. So what we as business people, as representatives of the business, have seen is that I don't think, and we are all adhere with regarding to that, that the increase of the tariff is at all going to resolve the issue between Eskom and the municipalities. It is a fact that Eskom has stated that the biggest supplier or the biggest consumer or the biggest client of Eskom is actually the municipalities. And we are running into court cases over and over again where we as business chamber has already been involved in with regarding to the fight between Eskom and the municipalities. Because the consumers, and as you've heard here in Matlosana, the amount of accounts that's been sent out, and that is not the problem of Eskom, it's an administrative problem of the municipality. Although the municipality, the jurisdiction has increased, the municipality, the number of people staying in our municipality has increased, the number of accounts being sent out, if they are sent out from time to time, have not increased above 125,000. And that's approximately more than 550,000 people. That is beside the fact that Eskom is supplying directly to Tikani, Kuma and Kanana, as far as I'm correct. And that is why the question is, what is the collection rate from the municipality? Now, we know that the municipality, rightly or wrongly at this stage, make use of the meter reading process to penalize people if they don't pay for the other services. They make use of this process to penalize you to pay or reduce your amount, or not amount, the quality, or yes, let us say the amount of electricity that you buy. But in the places where Eskom is supplying directly to the consumer, the end user, the municipality don't have that luxury. I don't say it's right or wrong, So part of this elephant situation is that if you look at the figures that has been presented to us this morning, from, if I'm correct, from 2019, the debt of the municipalities has risen more than 465% up until now. So the question is, how are we going to stop it? It's impossible for this municipality, who has also entered into one of these agreements with ESCOM, to pay back the money that they are supposed to pay. They're also running into a problem with regarding to the supply of water, where we are also involved to stop Midval from introduce a situation where we will have less water supply from Midval. So what we are saying is that the solution is not an increase in the tariffs. The solution is that the government, who is the owner of ESCOM, the government who is also the owner of the municipalities, must come up to a new negotiation agreement to see how it's going to be resolved, this situation. We have heard from the people this morning that there's alternative sources of electricity that's going to be in competition or is in competition with ESCOM. So the end is that I think we are closer with regarding to a national situation for the government to take over or keep ESCOM and supply electricity to the consumers on the end than we are with regarding to the health services of the government. So we are not supporting this increase. ESCOM, the proposal is that ESCOM with the municipalities, including the people who are sitting here today, to renegotiate, to take strategy and solutions with regarding to the collection of whatever is being paid. It's a huge challenge, I think, and it is still there for the municipality and ESCOM, but we have to do an audit of where the electricity is going, who's paying for what, and who cannot afford to pay it, and subsidize that people as far as possible. And I don't think, although ESCOM may play within the parameters of the rules and regulations of how they want to increase it, we are sitting with a social economic challenge in our country where a lot of people cannot afford something that they need to have access to, and that is our challenge. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oosthuizen. There are no questions from the members of the panel, but we would like to thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we also received a request from the member of the public, Elsa Phillips, who was supposed to present with the DA, but is presenting as a member of the public. Elsa Phillips, do we have Elsa? Okay.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
I just need to administer the oath. Do you have any objections?
I beg your pardon?
I need to swear you in before you start. All right. Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you are going to present to this panel is the truth and the whole truth?
That is so.
Thank you. Please state your name and the community you're coming from.
I'm Elsa Phillips. I'm a member of the DA and I live in Clarksdorp.
Okay. Thank you. You may proceed.
Ladies and gentlemen, a lot of what I wanted to say has been said already, but I would like to just add a little bit on. Once upon a time, South Africa experienced a fairy tale. ESCOM was built. People from international destinations visited ESCOM and was impressed with the continuous affordable electricity. The economy grew rapidly, proving development, employment, and all things wonderful. ESCOM was known for the high quality, reliability, and affordability of its products. Electricity magic came to South Africa. I quote now the mission statement of ESCOM: to provide sustainable electricity solutions that improve the quality of life in South Africa and the region. The mandate states that electricity would be provided in an efficient, sustainable electricity solutions that improve the quality of life in South Africa and the region. The mandate states that electricity would be provided in an efficient, sustainable manner, including the generation, transmission, distribution, and sales. The supply is critical to economic growth and prosperity. We can't deny that it is true. Principles of ESCOM, I want to quote them: to ensure that zero harm befalls the employees, contractors, the public, and the natural environment. Example, zero fatalities, zero injuries, zero environmental incidents, zero tolerance, zero defects. All this and more equals excellence. Can we question this now? Although there is no load shedding now, the present situation is insufficient generating capacity. Identified problems: indecisiveness and governmental paralysis, state capture, government deficiencies, corruption, inadequate maintenance practices. We can all agree to that. More reasons for continuous escalating prices for consumers. Between 2018 and 2023, ESCOM recorded cumulative and financial losses of about 105 billion, while receiving 250 billion taxpayer-funded bailouts to state-owned entities, SOEs, have diverted expenditure from service delivery, which could improve people's lives. Yet the consumer is paying, and still more is demanded. The electricity bill is becoming bigger than most people earn in SA. The immediate-term growth outlook is left wanting. The consumer is paying more for more. Corruption, mismanagement in ESCOM, sabotage, and criminal syndicates within. Should ESCOM collapse due to growth failure, there will be widespread looting, hospital deaths, morgues running out of space, telecom failures, etc. ESCOM is in debt and the consumer has to pay, and the debts are tremendous. Problems ESCOM is facing now, for which the consumer has to pay, for example, network overloading due to illegal connections, vandalism, meter tampering, unauthorized network operations, theft of network equipment, purchasing electricity from unlicensed vendors. All the above mentioned problems should receive urgent attention. Thank you. I want to just add one thing. Is there a possibility that we could bypass the municipalities and pay directly to ESCOM? Would that not solve quite a few problems that we have with the municipality? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Phillips, for your presentation. Thank you. We now going to turn to ESCOM for the closing remarks. It's not to start from scratch your presentation, but it is really the opportunity to respond as an applicant to the issues that have been raised, and also ensuring that if you don't have the specific responses to the issues that were raised, you can then indicate how you're going to make the information available in terms of you dealing with also the communities, but also making it available to NERSA. Thank you very much. If you can come forward.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the public for all their inputs. That is appreciated by Eskom as well as the regulator. I think firstly, let me start with the issue of affordability. I mean, this is a key theme throughout these public hearings. Eskom acknowledges that. But I think like the second last speaker, Mr. Oosthuizen said, this is a socio-economic issue that, yes, Eskom has made its application and we have to motivate that and the regulator has to adjudicate. But there are a lot of issues here that are in the government's domain and they need to address the socio-economic issues to deal with the affordability. Within Eskom and NERSA, as well as municipalities, there is only certain mechanisms we can do in protecting the vulnerable in terms of certain tariffs. But at the end of the day, for Eskom to continue to supply electricity, to maintain the infrastructure that it can produce and supply the electricity to the end of its lives, it's still a number of years to go, and that does come at cost. Together with that, it means we do have contracts in place, like the coal contracts that were mentioned throughout these hearings. We've been asked lots of questions around coal, which the team has responded, and I'm sure as we get to the conclusions of these hearings, we'll also come back and address those issues. We do run public procurement processes in terms of all our coal contracts, and based on those outcomes, those are the contracts that are concluded. But if we get back to the affordability, as I highlighted earlier, we believe as Eskom one of the avenues for government is to increase that utilization of the free basic electricity, and importantly, there are discussions together with government to look to increase that 50 kilowatt per hour hours per month, but that has to be funded by the fiscus, and fiscus has also have its challenges. With regard to some of the large industrials that were mentioned, ArcelorMittal and a number of others, and this links back to the one question from the panelists. Within the negotiated pricing agreements, that is a policy from government. There's a framework around it. Applications come to Eskom, we assess it. If it meets the requirements, we get approval, we submit it to the regulator. There's public hearings that are held and decisions that are made. With regard to the one question specifically around the community and the tuck shops, our understanding is that should be exactly the same rate as Eskom customers would pay. I do recall when we were at Cape Town that the citizens and the residents there were explaining what 10 Rand buys them in terms of units of electricity, and it varied between 4 units to, at one stage, I think less than 2 units. And this is an important aspect that needs to be addressed in society, that the poor vulnerable are not further abused in the way we are transacting at a retail level. With regard to maybe municipalities, and there was presentations as the difference of prices between Eskom and municipalities, we have, and through several processes, look to also have customers pay directly to Eskom, which will then help reduce the non-payment. However, I think an important point was made by one of the presenters today that the municipalities use that meter and that electricity as a mechanism to get other payment from customers. And I think until that is addressed by government, it does remain a challenge. So yes, it's a tough ask in putting this forward as ESCOM, as a board and as a management team. We have applied our mind. We believe, led from the board, we're dealing with corruption, we're working with law enforcement agencies. Yes, there are still a number of investigations that are ongoing, but the current management team and the board are addressing that. It's not going to change overnight. I think these issues around corruption is widespread. It's not only within ESCOM, it's throughout other institutions and the country, and that needs to be addressed. ESCOM can't solve that by itself. We meet on a weekly basis with the law enforcement agencies. They even have an office at ESCOM for the last 2 years, and we are working with the SIU as well. But at the end of the day, to the panel and to the public, the electricity production and the maintenance of the infrastructure is coming at a cost. Yes, through your comments and inputs, NERSA will assess that efficiency of it, and ESCOM must then be allowed to recover that. However, the challenge that's making this even more difficult, like we've seen, is the non-payment of what is due to ESCOM. So that issue needs to be addressed, and government needs to take heed of all these inputs from the public during these public hearings, and we as ESCOM will also take that on board. There's been some actions that are asked of us that we will address in these closing hearings as ESCOM. But at the end of the day, I think the last speaker did say this, if ESCOM has to continuously deliver on our turnaround, and as part of the turnaround, it does include a future of renewables. ESCOM is never going to be the major supplier of renewables. We believe as a combination between the IPPs and ESCOM, we can share in the renewable space. But at the end of the day, you still need the infrastructure to deal with baseload capacity. And it's not a 1:1 ratio in terms of capacity, because there's an energy component that is linked to the amount of energy you get from a coal station versus a renewable technology, irrespective of weather conditions. Yes, we must deal with the efficiency and the reliability of the plants. There are old stations, and we're addressing that. The newer stations like Kusile, we see, and Madupi, the level of performance we're getting out of them, and that's the question that the chair has asked that we will come to address. At the end of the day, the balance needs to be made. It's a tough decision for the regulator. All these inputs will be taken into account. But I think also what I tried to highlight today, 500 billion rand of support, and ESCOM is still not financially sustainable, which means in my summary of those 4 elements of financial sustainability, the other component of payment, substantially municipalities and metros, plus this migration to cost reflectively, plus we deal with our efficiencies. That's how we get to financial sustainability, which is a direct inflow into operational sustainability. I've said this at Cape Town. One big difference that the debt relief has made from government, it meant for the first time in 7 years, we could release to the business 3 years of capital money in advance, so they can procure it timelessly to conduct the necessary investments into the infrastructure, not only in terms of generation, but transmission and distribution. Chair, I think one of the other components, and we'll also come back with this in the closing hearings, is we need to also address the issues around non-payment and bypassing. And in the distribution environment, we are looking to accelerate a smart meter rollout of 7 million meters within the ESCOM jurisdiction. I think a similar thing, I recall the minister saying that is also critical from a municipality perspective. But Chair, we take all the comments on board, we appreciate it. And yes, I have to say this, I think ESCOM people and staff, yes, we got some bad apples and we need to deal with it. But through the difficult 15 years of load shedding, 40,000 people in the worst stages of load shedding came to work every day to ensure we don't have a grid collapse, and we keep the load shedding to stage 6 or even lower. We're starting to see those benefits come through, and the morale that is created in ESCOM, I think Mr. Mkhize said 250 days almost. Our next target is 365, and then we stop counting, Mr. Mkhize. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. We note that because you said it under oath, and it is noted. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Kasim, and thank you to the ESCOM team today for assisting with the responses and the questions, and we are looking forward to the other responses in respect of the issues that we have already asked. We have now come to the end of this public hearing here in Gladstone today, and I would like to thank all the presenters who came forward and shared their views and also their proposals and what NERSA must do with the application that is before NERSA, and also for them to be here and hear from themselves what are the issues and how ESCOM has responded to the issues. I would like to thank you and thank the interpreters, thank the ladies that are helping with sign language, thank all of the people that were here today to make this public hearing to run smooth, all of the logistics that related to that. I would like to thank the members of the energy regulator for being here and for the questions that you have asked. The hearing is now adjourned. We asked you continuing with these public hearings. We're going now to Gauteng. Tomorrow we will be in Soweto, in Orlando, and on the 4th we will be in Galaga Estate. You are free to follow us on various media platforms on these hearings, and we will then on the 6th and the 7th we are going to Durban, KwaZulu-Natal, to conclude the process of public hearings in KwaZulu-Natal. We will inform the members of the public through various platforms what the process is going to be after we're finished with the public hearings. We thank you very much. Lunch will be served. Okay, lunch will be served at the restaurant, and there will be people that will be guiding you as to where you are supposed to go. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day.